In May 2019, a netizen posted on a website telling about a series of bizarre things that happened after he was approached by a woman pushing a baby stroller. The poster said that if she hadn't experienced it herself, she would never believe that it would happen to her one day. Because the process was too bizarre, please add a friend who likes to stay up late to watch it together. Then let's not talk too much and start today's story. I met a strange woman, and the one who came home with me was actually a paper doll. Time goes back to June 2017. On the day when the incident happened, the poster and her father had a quarrel about which university to fill in. Because both father and daughter have stubborn personalities, the two of them were in a stalemate and ignored each other. The poster stayed in the bedroom until in the afternoon, around 3 o'clock, she was getting more and more irritated from staying in the house. So she went to a park near the community, thinking of taking a walk to relax. But after she walked into the park for a distance, she found that something was wrong with the park today. She didn't know why there was no one inside. Because at this time in the past, when she came here, she would meet many old men and women walking their dogs or playing and singing instruments, but today the park was surprisingly quiet, without any sound. At first, she thought it was because the weather outside was too hot, so there was no one in the park. Then she walked alone deeper into the park, thinking of finding a place with more shade to sit for a while. But the more she walked, the more she felt something was wrong. Why didn't she meet anyone along the way? Just when she was hesitating whether to go back, she found a middle-aged woman in a short-sleeved shirt and dark green carrot pants standing in the fitness equipment area. She was pushing a baby stroller. It looked like she was pushing her child to bask in the sun. The host thought for a moment and thought that since there were people here, she shouldn't go forward. After all, this place was still popular. Then she found a bench not far from the woman and sat down. But she didn't expect that as soon as the host sat down, the middle-aged woman came towards her with a baby stroller. She didn't shy away from strangers and started chatting with the host about family matters, such as how many people were in her family, how many brothers and sisters she had, etc. The host was in a bad mood and saw someone taking the initiative. He started talking to her, and she wasn't too defensive. He basically said whatever he wanted to say. After a while, she felt that he seemed to know her very well. She couldn't help but chat with him for a long time. When she came to her senses, she found that the sun was about to set and the sky was getting dark. She planned to go home, but they were having a good chat at the moment. She was too embarrassed to say that she wanted to go home. So she thought of an excuse, got up to check on the child in the stroller, and then took the opportunity to say that it was too late and they should go out together. But when she stood up and walked towards the stroller, she suddenly realized that the child in the stroller didn't seem to make any sound during the long chat. Although she always felt something was wrong, she had already stood up. So she pretended to approach the stroller and glanced inside. But this glance made her heart rise to her throat and her scalp exploded. There was no baby in the stroller at all, only a wooden doll wrapped in blue cloth. The host's brows tightened immediately, thinking that this middle-aged woman might have a mental problem. Thinking of this, she didn't care about any social etiquette. She said goodbye and turned around and started walking towards the park entrance. But the strange thing was that when the host left, the middle-aged woman behind her also stood up and followed the host with the stroller. She followed slowly. At this time, the host was only muttering in her heart, afraid that the other party would do something bad to her. Good things. So she thought about walking a few steps faster and putting some distance between herself and the other person. But what she didn't expect was that after she walked quickly, the woman actually started to jog with the baby stroller. Seeing that the other person was about to catch up with her, the poster immediately started to run. She didn't breathe a sigh of relief until she ran to the road opposite the park. At this time, the poster calmed down and found that the middle-aged woman chasing her with the baby stroller stopped when she reached the exit of the park. She looked up at her while talking to the inside of the baby stroller, as if she was calling something. The poster was so scared that she quickly turned her head away and quickly started to run towards her community. However, the strange things didn't end there. As soon as the poster entered the community, she saw her father standing at the door of the apartment building waiting for her. Because what happened in the park in the afternoon was too weird. After seeing her father, the host wanted to tell her father about what happened in the afternoon. But she felt it was not safe to tell him outside. So she grabbed her father and thought about walking home quickly. Because it was an old community and no one was managing it. The sensor lights in the stairwell were always in a state of intermittent working. That day, after the host pulled her father into the stairwell, the host tried to cough several times. It was still dark inside. Luckily, the host's home was on the second floor. After that, she pulled her father and began to climb up little by little. During the period, the host also told her father, "I encountered a strange thing in the park next to our house today, which scared me." But her father ignored her. The host thought her father was still angry about what happened during the day. She didn't say much. She just pulled her father upstairs. But the strange thing was that she didn't know why. She always felt that her father was a little unsteady tonight. She needed a lot of strength to pull him up. And her father didn't say a word the whole time. Finally, she used all her strength and finally pulled her father up to the second floor. Just when the OP turned the corner and was just a few steps away from home, she found a figure standing in front of her door. Because the corridor was too dark, the OP couldn't see the figure clearly. He just stood there motionless. The two looked at each other briefly. Suddenly, the man quickly rushed towards the OP. For a moment, the OP was so scared that she was stunned. When she got closer, she saw that the man was her father. The author's heart skipped a beat at that moment. She thought, if the person in front of her was her father, then who was the person she was holding behind her? Before she could turn her head, her father pulled her over and whispered in her ear, "Don't talk, come into the house quickly." Then he pushed and dragged the poster towards the front door of her house. However, during this process, the poster still looked behind her reflexively. Instantly, the hairs on her body stood up. The poster said that although she did not see the face of the person behind her clearly at that time, she clearly saw that the lower half of the person was wearing a pair of green carrot pants, which were exactly the same as those worn by the middle-aged woman she met in the park in the afternoon. Then the poster's brain seemed to freeze. While she was still thinking, her father had dragged her into the house. After locking the door, the father asked the poster where she went in the afternoon after the quarrel. He also said that he had looked for the poster near the house for a long time but couldn't find her. The most important thing was, "Do you know what you were pulling just now?" The poster was a little speechless for a while, because the matter was far beyond her cognitive scope. She didn't know where to start. The father then said to the poster, "I was waiting for you at the door just now, and I watched you pull a green paper doll into the corridor with my own eyes." Hearing this, the poster could no longer hold back and started to cry. At this time, the father probably wanted to ease the tense atmosphere, so he picked up the phone. However, before he had even looked at it for a few seconds, he suddenly blurted out a curse word and quickly called the poster over to see what was going on. Then he handed the phone to the poster. Someone in the residence group sent a message, saying, "Who is this? Putting a paper doll at the entrance of the corridor in the middle of the night, trying to scare people to death." Then he attached a picture. The poster opened the picture and saw that it was indeed the corridor of their house. There was a paper doll as tall as a person at the corner. Just when the poster wanted to enlarge the picture to take a closer look, the message was withdrawn. The father and daughter stared at each other, and they didn't dare to go out that night. When the father went out to work the next morning, he found that the paper doll had disappeared. The story ends here. Welcome to discuss in the comments section. See you next time. This is a very interesting folk ghost story. Then the story begins. No one who has seen me since I was a child can remember what I look like. Even my parents picked up the wrong child when I was in kindergarten. My grandma Jo said that this was because I had no face. My face was stolen shortly after I was born. My parents were a perfect match. It is said that when I was born, I was called the most beautiful baby in the past 20 years by the Women and Children's Hospital. The hospital's publicity department took my photo and printed it into a picture album for publicity. My grandma Jo learned numerology from a master when she was young. The blind school of zodiac fortune tellers said that according to the birth date, I will grow up to be a beautiful, elegant, and graceful beauty. I will definitely meet a noble husband and hold a high position in the future. In ancient times, it was the fate of a queen. When my grandma Belle was happy, she would tell everyone she met. Perhaps from that time on, people had placed their hopes on me. When I was 3 or 4 years old, my parents had already noticed something was wrong. They could never remember what I looked like, but they attributed it to being too tired and having too much work pressure. Until they picked up the wrong child from kindergarten more than once. The teacher also told them that although they knew my name, they could never remember my appearance. That's when they panicked. They took me to various hospitals for full-body examinations, but nothing was found. Later, they went back to their hometown to pick up my grandma. When my grandma Jo saw my face change, she slapped her thigh and said, Shinshin's face was stolen. This person's cultivation was limited, and he couldn't steal her life. So he stole her face. My mother was angry and anxious, and she hugged me and cried. Who would be so bad-hearted to steal someone else's face? Don't they have a face themselves? My grandma Jo sighed and said, It's true. This child who stole the face was either severely disfigured or born without a face. He desperately needed a good-looking face to live. Are there people who are born without a face? My mother couldn't believe it, she was too surprised to cry. It is said that there is a faceless person in every 10 million people. This kind of person has no face and specializes in stealing other people's faces to use. I haven't seen it either, but I heard my master mention it in the early years. I remember it. When Shinshin was less than 3 years old, there was a fire in a family near our house, and the whole family died. There was only a 5-year-old girl left, whose face was disfigured by the burn. Her grandmother came to pick up the child and said that she went back to the countryside. My father pondered for a long time and finally remembered a key clue. Yes, families with faceless people will most likely suffer accidents. Faceless people are born with bad luck and are destined to be lonely for life. Moreover, if faceless people want to change their faces, they usually have to destroy their original faces first, so that the face change is natural. If this faceless person just steals faces, it will be fine. I am afraid that he will become powerful in the future and steal lives. My grandmother Jo looked solemn. What should I do? My mother panicked. My grandmother Jo said, First, my family needs to move. To delay the time when the faceless man comes to our house again. Second, she will ask her senior brother to kill the faceless man together. Then my face will be restored. These things must be completed before I turn 20. Otherwise, my life will be completely faceless. My fate will be rough and miserable. Even if I meet the destined person, we will not be harmonious. I will end up living alone. However, my grandmother Jo's senior brother passed away the next year. Grandma Jo's cultivation is limited. When I was 19, I still hadn't found the faceless man. And I was used to being ignored. I could never see my face clearly. In the graduation photo. When I was a sophomore, a turning point came. I met a pervert while running. That's what I called Chu Wei at the time. He always ran behind me and stared at me. For many years, I was used to being treated as invisible. I was not used to being noticed suddenly. So after he followed me for a week, I couldn't stand it anymore and stopped him. "Hey! Why are you always following me?" "Because you are very beautiful." Chu Wei, a special disciple of the I Ching research master Zhongxing. "Let's get to know each other." Chu Wei smiled and put one hand in his pocket. The other hand stretched out to me. He looked like a gangster in a Hong Kong drama. Humph! What a nonsense. I couldn't help but sneer. From childhood to adulthood, no one has seen my face clearly. How can you tell that I am beautiful? Well, actually, I can't see it clearly. He saw my doubt and disdain. He scratched his scalp and said, "But there is a black hair on your head." Before I got angry, Chu Wei said this sentence to turn the situation around. "What do you mean?" "Su Xin, you are in a disaster. Everything that belongs to you seems to be moving away from you. If you don't survive this disaster, you won't die. But you will become a living dead and wander on the edge of the world." Chu Wei restrained his smile and didn't seem to be joking. His words reminded me of what my grandma once said. A bone-piercing chill crawled along my spine and spread throughout my body. "This person has always been by your side." He leaned over and whispered in my ear. My hair stood on end and I looked at him in horror. But he kept smiling and continued, "Don't react so much, maybe she is looking at you." "Who are you?" "This boy looks only a few years older than me." "How does he know so much?" Chu Wei, the 187th generation descendant of Mao Shan. "Your grandma Jiao asked me to help you, Xiao Xinxin." He chewed gum in his mouth, and his breath was refreshing with mint. He looked careless and unremarkable. If he hadn't told me so many secret information, it would be hard to believe that this big boy in a sportswear in front of me would be a Mao Shan Taoist priest. "From now on, Xiao Xinxin, you have to start pretending to be in love with me, so that I can help you find that woman. Oh, by the way, my identity to the outside world is the son of the richest man in Shanghai. Don't forget to tell the people around you, the more high profile the better." He naturally took my hand. Isn't it against the rules for a Taoist priest to do this?" I sneered. Chu Wei shrugged and said, "For Xiao Xinxin, everything is worth it." Chu Wei and I found a coffee shop. We sat in the corner and started our first date. "Xinxin, think about it now. Which people have been by your side since you were a child?" I counted on my fingers. Michelle, Depeng, and Sun Wugua, 3 identities in total. Chu Wei took out his phone, opened the memo, and started recording. "Michelle has been my classmate since I was a child. From elementary school to college. It's amazing, right? That is to say, Michelle appeared 3 years after you moved." Chu Wei poured a cup of milk into the coffee cup, added 3 pieces of sugar, frowned and took a sip. "Yes. Actually, if you don't like coffee, we can drink milk tea next time." I couldn't help but add, "This guy almost wrote on his face that I don't like coffee." "No, that's it. The view is wide, the environment is quiet, and there are not many people." Chu Wei waved his hands hurriedly. As if to prove that he likes bitter coffee, he mustered up the courage to take a big sip and swallowed it. At this moment, I believed that he was a Taoist priest who was not interested in worldly things. "Is this Michelle pretty?" "Pretty, she has always been the school beauty." I answered a little sadly and swallowed the second half of the sentence silently. Moreover, the senior who I have always had a crush on has become her boyfriend. Where is Depang? Depang is my neighbor after I moved. Because she is a little fat and strong, I call her Depang in private. She is very nice and a gentle fat person. Is she pretty? Chu Wei asked casually while recording on his mobile phone. What do you think? I rolled his eyes at him. Later, I thought that what I said seemed to be impolite to obese people. So I added, in fact, if she is thinner, she should be very beautiful. Where is she now? She failed the college entrance examination and didn't like going to school. So she started her own business and opened a flower shop. The business is not bad. Who is Sun Guogua? Sun Guogua is my cousin. When I was 6 years old, my aunt's family had a car accident and Guogua was the only one left. My dad brought her to live with me. Now she is about to graduate from college and is looking for a job in the city. Beautiful. Chu Wei just opened his mouth. I interrupted him and said, beautiful, very pretty. If she appeared in our school, Michelle would have nothing to do with her. I replied angrily. Xiao Xinxin, you seem to be angry. Chu Wei looked at me with a smile in his eyes. I am not, I am very happy. See, I am very happy. I spread my hands and squeezed a smile like a plaster on my face. I don't know why I suddenly felt a little angry, and there was a trace of sadness. No boy has ever said I am beautiful in all these years. Because I have no face, they can't remember me at all. Because I have no face, I have never had any youth at all. I am almost 20 years old, and I don't even have a flirt. Isn't it unfair? Little Xinxin, look at me. Chu Wei changed his casual look and looked at me seriously. I looked at him and saw a girl with a bleak figure reflected in his eyes as bright as stars. Little Xinxin, Chu Wei, promise to find your face back. You must believe that you have a bright future and your prince is waiting for you. If the prince doesn't want you to find me, you can use me as a spare tire. Don't cry, I get flustered when the girl cries. When I was moved, he added this sentence. This show-off is really serious for only 3 seconds. I wiped the tears that were about to overflow from my eyes and said to him, Chu Wei, you show-off, who wants to use you as a spare tire? Well, it's not impossible to be the main person. I have to report to the master. He picked up the coffee with a helpless look on his face and drank it slowly. I sprayed a mouthful of coffee far away. Is this guy really a Taoist priest? Seriously, Xiao Xinxin, bring me all your photo albums from childhood to adulthood, especially the photos taken with these 3 girls. I have a feeling that she is among these 3 girls. Before leaving, Chu Wei asked me, Xiao Xinxin, when is your birthday? June 15th, what's wrong? It's okay. As a boyfriend, you must know your girlfriend's birthday, right? Chu Wei's face changed slightly when he heard this, but he quickly returned to normal and laughed. Although he concealed it well, I know that I don't have much time. It's March now. That means that I have less than 3 months to lose my face forever. And I may be completely forgotten by the world. Chu Wei, that. My Grandma Jiao must have paid a lot for you. I don't know what Grandma Jiao paid. She even invited the descendant of the hermit sect to help me. She has been worried about me for many years. She traveled thousands of miles to find the little girl whose face was burned in the fire. She found that the little girl's face was not healed at all, and she was still the disfigured face. She was soft-hearted and gave all the money she had to the little girl's grandmother. She had no money to take the bus, so she had to call my mother and transfer money to her to buy a ticket back. Don't worry about this, she hopes you can live well. Xinxin, cheer up and don't let her down. The spring breeze in March is already a little warm. I nodded vigorously to Chu-Wei. As soon as I got back to the dormitory, I posted a circle of friends. The content was a photo of Chu-Wei and I holding hands in a cafe. Chu-Wei's perfect side profile and tall and sturdy back. Not to mention, this guy is pretty good looking. When I woke up, my circle of friends exploded. Michelle left a message, "Sister, you are a 1,000-year-old iron tree that has blossomed," grinning expression. Fadi left a message, "Shinshin is so mean, you didn't introduce such a handsome guy to us," sexy expression. My cousin Sunwigwa was even more outrageous, "Bring it out quickly for everyone to appreciate, and help you check it," sexy expression plus grinning expression. I replied uniformly, "They all look useless." Angry expression of a lecherous evil woman, done. Leave them alone for 2 days first. After a few days, slowly exposed Chu-Wei's identity as a rich second generation. The next day I asked for leave and went home. I went back and found the albums that I had locked in the cabinet for many years. In fact, I have very few photos, only 2 albums. Because I think taking photos is meaningless to me. Just ask, every time I take photos, I basically look at others who would be willing to take photos. But there are also some special moments during festivals. For example, at graduation, I would be pulled over to take photos, so these photos were taken. Looking at these photos, I remembered what Chu-Wei said that night, and I felt mixed emotions. If she only stole your face and didn't want to steal your life, she could just walk away after stealing it. That would be the most troublesome. It would be too difficult to find her in the vast sea of people. Even if we use our own tracking technique, it would take some effort. But she was too greedy. She must have heard that your fate was noble and became greedy. And stealing life is much more difficult than stealing face. She can only do it step by step. Through contact, steal your luck bit by bit. You are now, think about it. Who of them is likely to get more of your personal belongings? Underwear, hair, etc. Michelle and I live in the same dormitory. Depeng and I used to play together. Sunwigwa has always lived in my house. It's possible. These 3 girls are the few friends I have had since I was a child. To be honest, I don't want to doubt any of them from the bottom of my heart. But if it's poison wrapped in sugar, it's better not to have it. A week after I posted a circle of friends that seemed to expose Chu-Wei's identity. Michelle was the first to get restless. She asked me, Depeng and Sunwigwa out for tea. I also took the opportunity to officially announce my relationship with Chu-Wei. However, there is some people are used to suppressing others. When people in a lower position want to rise to the top, she will feel uncomfortable even if they just stand side by side with her. Shinshin is so powerful, she is a rich and handsome son-in-law. Michelle pulled my clothes and winked. But there was jealousy in her eyes that could not be concealed. In order to make my friends and classmates remember me, my clothes over the years have always been niche clothes that my mother has asked someone to customize. There is an artistic word on the chest. The style and color are fixed. They knew it was me at a glance. We have just started. I pretended to be shy and lowered my head to look at my toes. Big Fat and Sunwigwa started to make a fuss. These 3 people are very I have to call Chu-Wei. Let him come over to show everyone. This is exactly what Chu-Wei and I want. I reluctantly took out my phone and called Chu-Wei. 10 minutes later, Chu-Wei rushed over. When Chu-Wei appeared, the 3 women's eyes lit up at the same time. I have to say, this guy is dressed up. He really looks like a handsome man. Let me introduce him. Chu-Wei, who studies the Book of Changes in the College of Arts, is a student of the Master of the Book of Changes, Zhongxing. The three of them had hearts in their eyes, and after a collective wow, they all stretched out their palms for Chue to read their palms and tell fortunes. Only Sunwugwa stretched out her hand, then quietly took it back and sat aside to watch the fun. Handsome Chu, is your Jinlong group still hiring? If you are hiring, can you introduce me to the group? I have always been a loyal fan of Jinlong group. Big Fat shouted. Okay, no problem. I will talk to Secretary Lu later. Chu Wei put one hand in his pocket, looking very handsome. Big Fat's eyes were full of hearts. Hi. Hi. Although he is nominally a boyfriend, it is really annoying. What kind of fake sisterhood is this? Look at Chu Wei again, staring at the most beautiful Sunwugwa. I even doubt if he still remembers the purpose of his visit. My cousin Sunwugwa completely inherited the beauty of my aunt. If I didn't lose my face, I should be very beautiful too. I drank 1 cup of fruit tea after another. The fruit tea tasted like alcohol. How is it? Is there any clue? After the party, Chu Wei and I held hands. We waved goodbye in the envious eyes of the 3 people. We strolled in the afterglow of the sunset. Well, I have studied the photos. Adding the information I just collected, Xiao Xinxin, I think I found her, but I am not sure yet, I need to verify it. Deodorant leaned close to my ear and whispered. The mint smell blew on my neck, and the atmosphere was very ambiguous. Although I have no face, I think I blushed. I was about to push him away, but he said she was still looking at us. So he did it on purpose, to make such an ambiguous move. Let the faceless person be jealous and speed up the process to steal my life. Can you tell me who she is first? My little heart was beating violently, more nervous than the college entrance examination. At present, Sunwugwa is the most suspicious. She dare not let me read her palm, and her face is very similar to your father's. At first glance, it is father and daughter. I rolled my eyes at him and said, That's it? Let me give you an answer. Sunwugwa has a broken palm. After her parents, my aunt and uncle, passed away, a fortune teller said that her broken palm killed her parents, so she has always blamed herself. The broken palm is also her heart knot, it is normal for her not to show it to you. In addition, my father is her uncle. Haven't you heard of the old saying, nephews look like uncles? Uncles and nieces are very close blood relatives, it is normal to look alike, right? This guy analyzed for a long time and came to this rubbish conclusion. It makes me seriously doubt him. He is an embroidered pillow that looks good but is useless. So. Chu Wei scratched his head. But I still think Sunwugwa is suspicious. Xiao Xinxin, please believe in a man's intuition. Chu Wei read my contempt and straightened his back and said, No. Do men have such a thing as intuition? Chu Wei saw that I still had doubts about his authority. He took out his tablet and showed me the latest information about the faceless man that the master had just sent me. The faceless man is actually not a human in the strict sense. She is a humanoid monster bred by a pregnant woman who was infected with the evil spirit wandering between heaven and earth. She has no face and no destiny of her own. If she doesn't take other people's faces, she won't live past the age of 5. So it can be said that taking other people's faces is her instinct. It's as natural as a wolf eating a sheep. The way she takes people's faces is to stare at them. If she wants it in her heart and sees it too much, it will naturally turn into her own face. But it is not clear at present. Will the face of the person who has been taken away be rejected after being placed on the faceless person's face? In other words, can it fit well and are there any side effects? This can only be known by asking the faceless person himself. In addition, it is not clear how the faceless person takes away other people's fate. Information in this regard is to be supplemented. Good news is also bad news. Xiao Xinxin, the face stolen by the faceless person may not fit well. So if they like this face very much and want to keep it, they are likely to continue to steal the person's fate. You mean that person keeps stealing my fate bit by bit because my face doesn't fit? There is such a possibility. Chu Wei paused and said, in fact, there have been faceless people a long time ago, and they are very secretive. Some people often don't know that their faces have been stolen throughout their lives. Even if they occasionally find out, they will choose to self-destruct when they are rounded up. Never caught alive, so there is too little information. Xiao Xinxin, let's try again. How about going camping in a week? Let's observe again, especially the face. There should be flaws if you look closely. For example, the skin color will not be completely consistent. I trust you again. I gritted my teeth. A week later, Chu Wei asked me to invite Michelle, Big Fat and Sun Wigwa to go camping. When they heard Chu Wei was going, they readily agreed. Chu Wei was busy running around, very gentlemanly. The faces of these three women clearly showed the words poaching. Their eyes kept turning around him. I have to say that Chu Wei, this scheming man, is too resourceful. In the sunshine outdoors, the faces of these three women are clearer than under a magnifying glass. Big Fat's face and neck are the same skin color, which is basically completely ruled out. The remaining Michelle and Sun Wigwa are questionable. Michelle has been doing beauty treatments all year round, and she disappeared as soon as the summer vacation came since she graduated from high school. It is said that she had plastic surgery, but she has never admitted it and claimed to be a natural beauty. If she really had plastic surgery, I have to say that she is worthy of being a rich girl. They all found top beauty institutions, and the results are really good, all of which are minor adjustments. It gives people a feeling that women change a lot when they grow up, and they become more and more beautiful. Maybe because she uses facial masks every day, her face has a little color difference from cheeks to neck. Sun Wigwa, who is also a facial mask expert, also has the same problem. But it is true that she has not had plastic surgery. I don't know if it is an illusion. I found Sun Wigwa standing by the water several times to admire her face. It was like looking at a favorite object and occasionally touching it once or twice. Her touch gave me inspiration. Just looking is not enough, I have to try it. So I discussed with Chu Wei and tried the authenticity of these two faces in the name of swatting mosquitoes. As a result, I discovered a secret. When I slapped Michelle on the face, she screamed. She touched her nose as quickly as possible. From her expression that she wanted to spray me to death with a mouthful of salt soda. She did have plastic surgery, and she also had her nose moved, so she should not be a faceless person. A faceless person will definitely steal a face that he is satisfied with, and will not be stupid enough to suffer the sin of plastic surgery. So Sun Wigwa is the most suspicious. Chu Wei made a V sign to me, but I felt a chill in my heart. Over the years, I have long regarded Sun Wigwa as my own sister. Before Chu Wei appeared, I never had a doubt about her. It is just our speculation at present, and it is not certain. Don't be too sad, we will know who it is in a month. Chu Wei comforted me. Why is it a month later? The night of a month later is a rare een month, een day, and een time. People's luck is the weakest, and it is also the easiest time to be stolen. Your luck has been eroded by her little by little over the years, and you are just missing this last theft. Remember! Whoever asks you out to meet alone after 30 days is the faceless man. Chu Wei, you said that this faceless man has been by my side all the time. Why didn't my grandma find out? She is good at physiognomy, and it is her destiny. Catching this kind of evil spirit that is neither a demon nor a devil is not her strong point. Before she found us, she traveled all over the country to find the nemesis of the faceless man, but unfortunately she couldn't find it. This time we will use all our strength to help you, so someone will come to help you in a month. Xiao Xinxin, we can definitely get your face back this time. This is the only person who said he could help me in all these years. It's like a patient who has been seriously ill for many years, hearing someone say that he can cure his illness. His heart was immediately filled with gratitude and hope. Chu Wei, thank you. A month later, I woke up early in the morning and kept staring at my phone. At about 10 a.m., a WeChat message came. It was Depeng asking me to go eat Chongqing hot pot in the evening. I just agreed to her, and another message came. It was Michelle asking me to go shopping. There was only no message from Sun Wugua. I was completely confused and had to agree to everything first. I called Chu Wei to tell him the situation. Chu Wei cursed when he heard it. Xiao Xinxin, get ready. I will pick you up downstairs in 15 minutes. When I went downstairs, Chu Wei was on the phone with a serious face. When he saw me coming down, he hung up the phone and said to me, Xiao Xinxin, it's a bit troublesome. This situation should be because the faceless man noticed something. It would be good if the senior brother was here to help look at the air. It's a pity that his flight was delayed and he would not arrive until the evening. Don't worry, even if I am alone, she can't hurt you. Probably because he was afraid that I would be scared, Chu Wei added another sentence. When we were having dinner together, Chu Wei asked, I stretched out my hand and drew a few strokes on my palm. I took my palm back and looked at it carefully twice, but I didn't see anything on it. He smiled and said, the amulet I gave you cannot be seen by people. TSK, you are just being mysterious. The setting sun melted gold. I went to meet Depeng first. The hot pot restaurant was bustling with people and the aroma was overflowing. As the stove was roasting, Depeng's face became rounder. She waved at me enthusiastically and was very happy. We ordered everything and started to eat hot pot right away. Why did you think of treating me to hot pot today? Is it a special day? No, I just feel greedy and want to find someone to eat with me. Depeng hesitated for a moment and replied with this sentence. During the meal, Depeng was unusually enthusiastic. What tripe, yellowthroat, squid, mushrooms, and green vegetables were put into my bowl with a public chopstick. But I was not in the mood to eat at all, and I reluctantly ate a few chopsticks. Seeing that the time for the appointment with Michelle was almost up, I said goodbye to Depeng. Depeng didn't even try to keep me. According to the past, she would definitely let me eat more before leaving. Something is wrong. But nothing happened. I came out and saw Chu Wei eating skewers outside the store and shook my head. In the taxi, I typed to tell him the situation. He told me not to worry, he was following behind in another car. When I arrived at the place where I had agreed to meet Michelle, I started to feel dizzy and uncomfortable. Michelle saw me from a distance, came up to me happily, took my arm and said, Xinxin, let's go. Prada has released several new models, help me see which one is the most suitable for me. Prada's store is on the top floor of the mall. The higher the floor, the more dizzy I feel. Xinxin, what's wrong with you? Are you feeling uncomfortable? Michelle asked. I looked up at Michelle. I always felt that there was a hint of sinister smile in her eyes tonight. No, I'm fine. I forced myself to be energetic and looked around, only to find that the entire Prada store was empty. There were countless candles. There was a huge talisman array in the middle of the candles. If I remember correctly, this Prada store is Michelle's family property. Michelle, is that you? I looked at Michelle with some sadness. It seems that Chu Wei and I were both wrong. What? She smiled strangely. Little Xin. Chu rushed over and threw a piece of talisman paper with fire at Michelle. She turned and ran. Chu chased after her and threw several pieces of talisman paper at her. It seemed that a scream sounded from a long distance. But after Michelle left, I was still dizzy. I was dragged and thrown into the talisman array by someone. I fell on something. I looked and saw that it was my underwear and hair. There was one of my favorite hairpins. I remembered that it disappeared inexplicably at home. I took a deep breath and looked up at the person. Sun Wugwa's excited and distorted face appeared in front of me. Her right arm was bleeding and seemed to be injured. Xin, my good cousin, be a good person to the end and send the Buddha to the west. Since you gave me a face, give me a life as well. She raised her uninjured left hand and gently stroked her left cheek. It seemed that she loved this face very much. Why? It's not enough to get the face, but also the life? Why do you want to kill them all? I screamed. She pointed a finger at my forehead and smiled. Who can complain about too much good things? I want to live a better life, is that wrong? As she pressed harder, I gradually felt something was being pulled out of my body. It hurt so much, it was like skinning and cramps. I curled up in pain. My aunt and uncle also died in your hands, right, Sun Wugwa? I gritted my teeth and asked, yes, otherwise how could I live in your house? You know your face is very attached to its owner, so I can't be too far away from you. Actually, I didn't want to steal your life at first. But there was no way, your face was not obedient. I had to go all out and take your fate. So in fact, she didn't fit my face very well. She turned her body slightly, looked at the talismans around her and said, look, it took me more than 10 years to learn it. It's not easy. I got your life and your face. I completely became you. See if it doesn't stay peacefully on my face. After saying that, she slapped herself in the face with a neurotic sound. I screamed in shock. I suddenly remembered that Sun Wugwa had sleepwalking since she was a child, slapping herself in the face in her sleep. Sometimes she even appeared in my room in the middle of the night. At that time, our whole family thought that Sun Wugwa was traumatized by the death of her parents. My parents even took her to see a psychologist, but it was of little use. It turned out that she was awake from the beginning to the end, she was just subduing my face. Because we have a close blood relationship, even though she and my father look like father and daughter, we never doubted it. It turns out that the cruelest people are those who are related to us by blood. Now, let's take a little blood from the palm of our hands and drop it into the life-changing formation. Then you can rest assured. She smiled and took out a dagger to cut my palm. But something bounced back and she fell to the ground. When she got up and was about to rush into the talisman formation again, she was shocked by this broken cry, "Stop, evildoer." It turned out that Chu had rushed back. He also brought a middle-aged man with his hair tied up. It must be the senior brother that Chu had been talking about. The two sides soon got into a fight. Chu used talisman paper, and the senior brother used a whip. Sun Wugwa was not in the upper hand and was hit several times. In the end, in order to escape, she was so shameless that she used her face to block the attack. Chu was afraid of hurting my face, and twice he even helped her block the attack of the senior brother. Sun Wugwa proudly blew kisses at Chu. The senior brother took advantage of her complacency and whipped her back with a whip. She spat out a mouthful of blood. She looked at us with resentment and said, "I will decide Su Xian's life. If you have the ability, then guard it, and guard it well." After Sun Wugwa finished speaking, he teleported 5 meters away and gradually disappeared. The eldest brother chased him out, and Chu hurriedly destroyed the talisman formation. He took me out of the formation and asked, "Xiao Xin, how are you?" Chuwei's face, which was so pale from nervousness, enlarged in front of my eyes, so large that I felt dizzy. I have never felt so uncomfortable before, as if my whole body was broken. As soon as I opened my eyes, Chuwei stood by and watched carefully. Like a child who had done something wrong. I'm sorry, little Xinshin, I didn't protect you well. Where's Sun Guigua? She ran away. Don't worry, I have the senior brother here. The senior brother can see the qi, and Sun Guigua has stolen a lot of your luck. As long as you find the same qi as yours, you can find her. And now she is injured and her control is reduced. As long as she wants to keep your face, she must steal your life. Otherwise, she will become a faceless person again, or even worse. What will happen to her? She will be shattered and disappear from this world completely. I admit that I hate Sun Guigua at this moment. But I still feel a little heavy when I hear that her soul will be shattered. But the Creator created wolves and sheep, and they are enemies from birth. Either the sheep dies or the wolf dies, and no one will show mercy. This is reality. I asked my aunt and uncle, but they couldn't remember what Sun Guigua looked like before she was 5 years old. And the two families did have a party on your 3rd birthday. At the party, your Grandma Belle praised you for your beauty and showed off your fate. The door rang. Chuwei's senior brother came in and whispered a few words in Chuwei's ear. Chuwei's face changed, and then he said to me, Xiao Xinshin, we have some things to deal with. Aunt and uncle will be at the hospital within half an hour. Remember, don't trust anyone. If you find something wrong, clap your hands, I will come back immediately. After walking 2 steps, Chuwei returned and took off the peachwood beads on his wrist. The beads were very long, and he coiled them 2 or 3 times and put them on my wrist. Xiao Xinshin, wait for me. I nodded and watched their hurried backs. If I heard correctly, they should have found Michelle and mentioned the police station. I just couldn't figure out why Michelle would help Sun Guigua. And Depeng, the inexplicable hot pot he treated me to. It was like a mess lingering in my mind. Suddenly I remembered that when Sun Guigua appeared last, her right arm was injured. An idea popped up and made me shudder. Sun Guigua stole Michelle's face as a prop and even stole Depeng's face. No wonder Depeng's face was rounder that night, it should be rejection. And although Depeng's body was bulging that night, it was still thinner than usual. I thought it was an illusion at the time, but now I think of it and I'm sweating. So she should have been. I must have eaten something to make me weaker and help take my fate away. Then she used Michelle's face to lead me upstairs. She deliberately ran away when Chuwei appeared and led Chuwei away. But she didn't expect Chuwei to be so powerful and she would be hurt. After shaking Chuwei off, she tore off Michelle's face, turned back into Sun Guigua, and teleported back to continue operating the magic circle. So other people's faces are like masks to her. And my face is her favorite mask. I sat up suddenly, dizzy, and held the bed railing. No wonder Chuwei told me not to trust anyone. Michelle must have lost her face and even her life. I grabbed my hair and tore it hard. Sun Guigua, you devil, I will kill you. Dressing change for bed 6. A nurse knocked on the door. I then realized that my left shoulder was wrapped in gauze. It should be the scratch when Sun Guigua threw me into the magic circle. However, when the nurse removed the gauze behind my shoulder, I smelled a familiar fragrance. The next second, a cold scalpel was placed on my neck. Sun Guigua's laughter rang in my ears. Sun Guigua, how many people do you want to harm? Give others back their faces. She seemed to have heard a funny joke. After laughing a few times, she said coldly, "You can't protect yourself, and you still care about pitying others. Su xin, you fool." Shinshin, my parents pushed the door in and saw this scene. "Who are you? Let my daughter go," my father yelled at her. "She is Sunwugwa," I answered helplessly. "Uncle, aunt, you'd better get out of the way and let me take Su xin away. I promised to get a brand new Su xin, exactly the same." "You are dreaming. You ungrateful bastard. How did our family let you down? You treat us like this?" My mother held the door tightly, fearing that she would run away with me. "Favor? Haha. Favor? You still have the nerve to mention it. You have been praising Shinshin since childhood, even my parents have been praising her. As long as she is around, you will revolve around her. Who will look at me, who will praise me? Is it my fault that I have no face since childhood? I also want a beautiful face like Su xin. It's okay that she is so beautiful and her fate is so good. Why is she outstanding in everything and happy? Why should I be ignored and neglected and live a miserable life?" Sunwugwa roared. Tears dripped on the bed sheet and she actually cried. "So you took everything from her?" my father asked in a trembling voice. "Yes. Everything. I want to be Su xin. Dad, Mom, I am Su xin, I am." "She is crazy." I took advantage of her inattention and wrapped the peachwood beads on my wrist around her wrist. She screamed, dropped the scalpel, covered her arm and wailed. She tore the beads desperately, and soon the skin on her arm showed signs of burning. I clapped my hands, and Chuwei's senior brother rushed in. The senior brother wrapped a whip around Sunwugwa's neck. Chuwei smiled and blinked at me. If they were always there, how could Sunwugwa appear? Sunwugwa hit her face against the bed. "Be careful of her face," Chuwei shouted. "Don't worry." The eldest brother pulled Sunwugwa to the ground with a whip. Her arms were already burning and the bones were exposed. Chuwei threw a few talismans and stuck them on her body. She instantly let out a scream that was enough to pierce the eardrum. The eldest brother tightened the whip and chanted a spell. Sunwugwa turned to ashes in less than 10 seconds. There were more than a dozen faces left on the ground. Chuwei picked up my face from them. After washing it with the rootless water he brought from the master sect, it was put back on my face. I could feel my face hugging my flesh tightly. It was like a lost child throwing himself into his mother's arms. It would grow completely in one day and one night. "Congratulations, Su xin." Chuwei stretched out his right hand to me, and rarely did he call me Xiao Shinshin. "Thank you." I stretched out my left hand and held Chuwei's hand, tears in my eyes. "That's great, Shinshin. It turns out that our daughter's face has never left our home." My mother sat by the bed and kept wiping her tears. Good. It's good to be back." My dad also nodded frequently, tears streaming down his face. "Uncle, Aunt, Shinshin. My senior brother and I are going to deal with these stolen faces. Shinshin just got her face back, and her fate has just returned, so she needs more rest." I just took a look, and among these faces there is Depeng's face and Michelle's face. I hope they are all still alive. "Don't worry, we will let Shinshin rest now. You guys go, we are here." My dad waved at them. Chuwei and the senior brother each took 2 handfuls of faces, put them in bags and hurried away with them on their backs. "Mom, call my grandma Jao and tell her that my face has been found." I just lay down, and suddenly I think of my grandma Jao. Unexpectedly, my mother's tears that had just been wiped away came out again. Shinshin, your grandma Jao passed away 2 months ago. Half a year ago, she felt that she was dying, so she found Chu Wei's master. Because in the early years, your grandma Jao did not choose Chu Wei's master, but chose your grandfather. So the two had no contact for a long time. In order to save you, your grandma Jao had to find Chu Wei's master. Unexpectedly, the two laughed and put aside their grudges. Your grandma Jao spent the last moments of her life beside Chu Wei's master. Originally, she didn't let me tell you, but Mom thought you should know these things when you grow up. No wonder Chu Wei subconsciously avoided my grandma Jao when he mentioned her. I guess Grandma Jao was gone at that time. Grandma Jao and Grandpa had a good relationship. After Grandpa passed away, Grandma Jao has been single. I didn't expect that she had such a connection with Chu Wei's master. For me, Grandma Jao had to face that lost emotion, and it was perfect to untie the knot before she died. Sun Guoguo was right. No matter if I have a face or not, I have always lived in love. So I am lucky and happy. Grandma Jao, I love you. A week later, Chu Wei picked me up from the hospital. He was dressed in a suit and drove a Rolls-Royce, attracting everyone's attention. It's just a discharge, but he's dressed like he's applying for a job. I walked around the car twice, trying to find some signs of fakery, but I couldn't find any. Now this high imitation looks like the real thing, I sighed sincerely. Chu Wei smiled, said nothing, took the things, and put them in the trunk. He helped me sit in the passenger seat and buckled my seatbelt himself. He drove all the way to the Jinlong Group building, and the security guard ran over to open the car door attentively. Chu Wei waved his hand, and the security guard left tactfully. Let's meet Chu Wei. The 187th generation disciple of Mao Shan, the son of the chairman of the Jinlong Group, and the current executive director of the Jinlong Group. He's not a prince, I don't know if you dislike him or not. Chu Wei looked at me seriously. I pointed at him with trembling fingers. Oh my God, no way. This man is not only a real Taoist priest, but also a real rich second generation. I calmed down, cleared my throat and said, You mean you want to pursue me? Isn't it obvious? Chu Wei shrugged. It's okay. I'll think about it. My face is a little hot. I'll wait for you, Xiao Xinxin. In the evening, Chu Wei arranged a banquet. As soon as I opened the door, I saw Michelle and Depeng with a happy face. The two of them rushed over excitedly, and the three women cried and laughed, like crazy. After this shock, I think each of us has seen through some things and has grown up. That. Chu Wei, you will accompany me to pay tribute to my grandma Jao in a few days. After 3 rounds of drinks, I said to Chu Wei. In what capacity? Chu Wei looked at me with a smile. The bright eyes are like the vast sea of stars, with a girl's red face printed in them. Boyfriend, right. It's really inappropriate not to give you a name for so long. I stuttered a little, but still tried to maintain my appearance. Michelle and Depeng shushed. If you two want to show off your affection, wait until we leave. It's so sweet. Chu Wei and I smiled at each other and held hands tightly under the table. End of article.
What is it like to be trapped alone in a dilapidated house in a demolition area? On August 3, 2023, a netizen posted on a website. He described in detail a bizarre incident that he had personally experienced over a period of more than 10 years. First, he witnessed his childhood friend's accidental death on the railroad tracks, and his parents moved the family away for fear that the poster would be left with a psychological shadow. Then, the poster went on a business trip more than 10 years later and returned to that place. However, It was this unforeseen revisit to the old place that made him experience an extremely terrifying experience. Until the phone call he received later, he felt that everything he had encountered might not be accidental. It even changed the poster's view and fear of some unknown things. Friends who haven't slept yet, I suggest at one of your best friends to watch it together. So let's not talk too much, let's start today's story. My friend T saved my life. The story has to start from the poster's childhood. That day, the poster and four friends had nothing to do, so they ran to the railroad tracks near the town to play. But after playing for a while, for some reason, one of the friends, T, thought his calf stuck on the rail. At first, the stuck T didn't say anything, thinking that he could just pull it out with some effort. But he fiddled with it for a long time and tried various methods but couldn't get it out. He burst into tears in panic, and then his friends knew about it. At that time, the host was the oldest among the group of children and had a strong opinion. After understanding the situation, he told the other two children to run to the town to find adults for help. Then he and another strong child tried to pull T's leg out. As a result, the host and the other two used all their strength and pulled for 5 or 6 minutes, but they couldn't pull T's leg out of the gap in the rail, and T kept crying in pain. The two children who went back to call the adults were nowhere to be seen. Just when the host was thinking about how to get T's leg out, the sound of a train whistle almost scared the host and the other two out of their wits. The host's mind was buzzing and he was confused, thinking that it was bad. Both palms became wet. The stuck T didn't say anything at this time, and the whole person stood there as if he was still. The host, who reacted, quickly slapped the other person in the face and shouted, "What are you waiting for? Pull it out quickly." The other friend also reacted when he saw this. After that, the host and the other two didn't care whether T cried out in pain or not, and used all their strength. However, T's stuck leg was still motionless, and the oncoming train showed no sign of stopping. Perhaps the friendship of young people is always so pure. The host and the other two, who wanted to pull T out, didn't even consider what kind of harm the oncoming train would cause them. As the locomotive was getting bigger and bigger, the host suddenly found that T was not moving. He looked up to see what happened to T, and found that T was also looking at him. Then he said to the host in a very serious tone, "Brother, forget it." Then he pushed the host and another friend out with all his strength. Before the host and the other person could stand up again, the train came roaring over. They watched T being smashed to pieces, and blood was sprayed in the air like mist. The poster said that he would never forget that scene. Even now, he would tremble all over whenever he recalled it. After this incident, the poster fell seriously ill. After he recovered, his parents were afraid that the young poster would have any psychological trauma, so they finally decided to move the whole family to another city. Time flies, and in a blink of an eye, the poster graduated from college and started working. Once the company arranged a business trip for the poster, and the destination happened to be near the poster's hometown. After finishing work, the poster heard that the town where he used to live seemed to be demolished as a whole due to urban planning. Although he had to catch the bus back at night, he was afraid that if he didn't go to see the place where he lived when he was a child, he might never see it again in the future. So the op went back to the town and wandered around. It might be because he had been away for too long and his memory was declining, or because his hometown had changed so much that he got lost when he revisited the place he had walked countless times when he was a child. The op turned left and right on the street and came to an abandoned house. Just as he was trying to remember which family the house belonged to, he suddenly heard a dog barking from behind him. Because the op was bitten by a dog when he was a child, he had a psychological shadow since he was a child. When he heard the dog barking, his knees became weak uncontrollably. Without thinking, he opened the door and hid in the house, closing the door, intending to wait until the dog was far away before going out. As a result, the op found that there was no electricity in the house. It was already near dusk, and the whole room was dark. After waiting for about 2 or 3 minutes, the op heard the dog barking getting farther and farther away, and he was relieved. However, just as he stretched out his hand to open the door, his heart suddenly skipped a beat, and the hairs on his body stood up in fear. He didn't know if the door was broken or what, but no matter how hard the op tried, the door didn't seem to open at all, as if it was locked from the outside. At that time, the op felt like he was poured with a basin of cold water, and it was cold from head to toe. The sky was getting darker and darker. Since this area was a demolition area, All the residents had moved away long ago. If he was trapped here at this time, it would be really terrible. Thinking of this, the op shook the door a few more times and even kicked it a few times. But the door seemed to be sucked from the outside, and no matter how hard the op pushed or turned it, it couldn't be opened. The op had no choice but to take out his mobile phone, thinking of using the light of the mobile phone to look around the house to see if there were other doors to go out. After a simple look around the room, the op pushed open the door of the room closest to him. The wooden door may have been moldy because no one had lived there for a long time. The musty smell made the host feel dizzy and he sneezed several times. The door hinge was rusty, and he heard a very harsh creaking sound when he pushed the door. He then used the light of his mobile phone to shine around. The host found that this room might be the bedroom of the original owner. There was an DAED immortal table opposite the bed, and there seemed to be a photo frame on it. At this time, the host didn't know where his curiosity came from, and he walked directly to the table. He picked up the photo frame and looked at it, but this seemingly simple and casual action almost scared the host to death, and his body began to tremble uncontrollably. Because the photo in the photo frame was none other than the host's childhood friend T, who died unexpectedly. All thoughts suddenly came to his mind, and he was pulled back to the memory of more than 10 years ago that left him with a deep psychological shadow. It was as if he heard the whistle of a train again, followed by the blood mist sprayed instantly, and his friend T was smashed to pieces. The blood in the host's body seemed to be still, and he didn't know how long it took before a surge of hot blood surged up in his body. The op came to his senses and had only one thought in mind, which was to leave here quickly. The op turned around and started running back, but he hadn't run a few steps when he was tripped by something and fell to the ground with a plop. The mobile phone in his hand was also thrown away and fell directly under the bed. The op said that this was the closest time he had ever been scared to death in his life. First, he got lost for no reason and was forced to enter a dilapidated house. Then, the door was suddenly locked and he had to find another exit. He happened to see the photo of his friend T, who died tragically. Now the only light source on him was gone. All of this was too coincidental. The op was particularly entangled at this moment. It was completely dark outside. If he didn't take the mobile phone under the bed, he would definitely not be able to get out in the dark. If he took it, there was only a faint light from the mobile phone under the bed. Who knew if there was anything scary under the bed? Scenes from horror movies that I had seen before quickly appeared in the host's mind like a movie. The more the host tried to control his fear, the stronger it became. However, when the host hesitated whether to take it or not, the phone rang suddenly. It was no wonder that the caller must be the leader of the unit. The host said that the leader of his unit had poor ability but a bad temper. If he didn't answer the phone, he would definitely be targeted by him when he got back. The host had no choice but to suppress his fear and prepare to take out his phone. In order to wake himself up, he even slapped himself in the face. After taking a deep breath, he leaned over and slowly reached his hand under the bed. At that time, in order to avoid seeing something scary, the host kept his eyes closed the whole time. I thought, who cares what is under the bed? Anyway, I can't see it with my eyes closed. However, after a lot of searching, the host really touched the phone, but the ringing sound had stopped when he took it out. The op was about to get up with his phone when he suddenly felt something stuck on the back of the phone. He turned the phone over and saw a sticker on it. The op had a deeper impression of this sticker and he will never forget it. This is the most precious sticker in the op's sticker book when he was a child. It was so rare that it could be exchanged for any toy in the hands of his friends. The op got this sticker at that time, but he had a fight with his friend T, who had an accident when he was a child. He beat him and made him cry. The op was afraid that he would complain to his parents, so he agreed to give this sticker to T. When he saw this sticker again, the op finally understood why he walked into this room. All this was definitely not a coincidence: the barking of the dog, the locked door, and this sticker. The OP's first reaction was, "Isn't this the same as in the movies before? I'm afraid he has encountered a wrong ghost to claim his life." But what the op couldn't understand was that he thought he had lived a life of integrity and had never done anything bad. Besides, T's death was an accident, and he almost lost his life to save him. How could he end up like this? The op got angrier and angrier when he thought about it. With the outburst of his emotions, he had forgotten his fear. He started to talk loudly. I didn't push you onto the railroad tracks. You got stuck by accident and couldn't get out. Why do you blame me? You stinky boy, you can't play since you were a kid. When we were fighting, we agreed that no matter who lost, you couldn't cry. In the end, I gave you the stickers in exchange, and got beaten up by my dad when I got home. You rascal, do whatever you want. I'm your brother for one day, and I'll be your brother for the rest of my life. Who's afraid of who? Let's have a good fight. But no matter how the op shouted, there was no response in the room. The whole room was dark, and it was eerily quiet. The fear in the host's heart slowly surged up again. He trembled and said, "If you are fine, I will withdraw first." Then he began to take small steps, moving out little by little until he reached the gate. The host took a deep breath and tried to push the door again. As a result, he heard a creaking sound. The gate that could not be opened no matter how hard he pushed was pushed open by him. The host was a little unresponsive at the time. After a few seconds of short pause, he ran out quickly and ran all the way until he ran out of the demolition area. Seeing the bustling streets, he bent down and took a breath. Looking back at the demolition area he had just run out of, it was pitch black and he couldn't see anything clearly. Maybe he was overthinking just now. The gate must have been stuck because it had been too long. Thinking of this, the host laughed at his suspicious behavior just now. Thinking that there was no such thing in the world, everything was just people's imagination. Just when the host simply packed up and prepared to return, the phone in his hand rang again. It was still the big boss calling. The host quickly answered the phone and wanted to explain what had just happened. Before he could speak, the leader on the other end said hurriedly, "You finally answered the phone. I'm glad you're okay. I'm glad you're okay." The host was a little confused for a moment, and subconsciously asked the leader, "What's wrong? What happened?" The leader sighed and said, "Don't you know? The bus you are going to take back today had an accident, and the whole car fell directly into the water. It's all gone. You take a taxi back first, and I'll give you a few days off to have a good rest." The leader hung up the phone. The host put down the phone, secretly glad that he was trapped in the old house and didn't catch the bus. He couldn't help but take a breath, and then tears came out all of a sudden. He turned his phone over, and the sticker was still there. It was the sticker he and T had fought over. The author felt very complicated about this matter. Perhaps the series of experiences that happened today were not coincidences, but the care of T, a friend from another world. Thinking of this, the author raised his head and looked at the dark demolition area again, and said silently in his heart, "Thank you, brother. I will try my best to live well." Then he bowed deeply to the place where he once lived with T. The story ends here. Welcome to the comment area to communicate. See you next time.
Welcome to the Love Apartment, where couples can enjoy half rent and free water and electricity. But you need to follow the following rules. First, please do not listen to the radio station hosted by Mr. Zing at any time. If you accidentally listen to it, please keep your posture unchanged until he leaves. Second, do not disturb Sister Ife, who is meditating in the corridor. If she finds you, you can try to race with her, but I do not recommend you to do so. Third, stay away from foreign painters who talk about suicide by laparotomy. If you have already contacted him, do not communicate with him. Close your eyes, close your mouth, and leave quickly. Fourth, do not open the door to anyone who rings the doorbell. What you see may not be true. Fifth, you can open the door to someone who knocks on the door. Sixth, please do not lie after entering the apartment. Seventh, there is a safe house in the apartment, but you need to find it yourself. Eighth, you have to be careful of your aunt. She is best at acting and may hide anywhere you can't imagine. Ninth, one of the above rules is false. Please pay attention to identification. Looking at the contents of the list, I am a little confused. I am a graduate of Shanghai. In the first-tier cities where every inch of land is valuable, it is extremely difficult for outsiders to survive. The first step after graduation is to find a house, which has made it very difficult for me. Fortunately, my best friend Yuma came to me and said that she found a good apartment. It is well decorated, green, and has good property management. The key is that the rent is cheap, and as long as a couple moves in, the rent can be reduced by half, and water and electricity are all free. Yuma and I are both single. Yuma's plan is to bring 2 male classmates to pretend to be a couple. At that time, we will rent a 2-bedroom, 4-person room. Yuma and I will sleep in one room, and the 2 boys will sleep in another room. I always feel weird in my heart. Can such a pie fall from the sky? But in order to continue to work hard in Shanghai, I decided to move into this not-so-remote apartment with Yuma. On the first day of entering the apartment, I received an electronic list sent by the administrator. Looking at the weird and bizarre content on it, I felt uneasy and felt that something was wrong. Yuma comforted me and said that this apartment is full of young people, and maybe the atmosphere is lively. Is this a joke? But if the above content is a joke, isn't it a bit too much? I stood on the balcony and looked down. I always felt that the garden downstairs was like a dark bloody mouth, which made people's backs cold. At this moment, the door rang. Ding dong, ding dong. Umo jumped up from the sofa and said, "It must be Xiaoyan and Jiang Lin who came." I went to open the door. Just as Umo was about to press the door handle, I pulled her hand and broke out in a cold sweat. The 4th rule of the apartment is not to open the door to anyone who rings the doorbell. I rarely show this look, and Umo seems to have noticed it. She swallowed and put down her hand on the door handle. "Don't worry, look at the peephole." I stiffened my body and moved forward, carefully approaching the peephole, and Umo was also a little nervous. In my sight, the figures of Xiaoyan and Jiang Lin appeared. Seeing that ringing the doorbell didn't work, they began to knock on the door. "Umo, Qing Qian, open the door for us." It seems that the people outside the door are indeed Xiaoyan and Jiang Lin. And they are knocking on the door now. It is not against the rules to open the door for someone who knocks, right? Thinking of this, I nodded to Yuma and opened the door for them. Xiaoyan and Jiang Lin had just packed their luggage from school and rushed over. They were carrying a lot of bags in their hands. As soon as they came in, they kept praising the good environment. "You really don't say, it's hard to find a house at this price even with a lantern." While talking, Jiang Lin opened a bottle of beer naturally. Seeing that they were so normal, I was relieved. But at this time, Xiaoyan suddenly said with a smirk, "We are a man and a woman, why don't we listen to the radio telling ghost stories together? It will be very atmospheric. Anyway, we are not in a hurry for the interview tomorrow." Before we agreed, Jiang Lin opened his mobile phone and searched for radio channels, but no matter how he changed the radio station, it was the same content. His face changed slightly, and he lightly blamed, "It's really weird, what a ghost thing." Then, the voice of the male host on the radio station gradually became clearer. "Welcome to Listen to Your Moon My Heart, I am the host Mr. Zheng." I froze, and Jiang Lin's face became more and more unfamiliar, and an ominous premonition came to my mind. In an instant, I felt my throat tighten, my breathing stagnated, and my brain could not think. The first rule of the apartment is that you should not listen to the radio program hosted by Mr. Zheng at any time. Turn it off. Turn it off quickly. My shout startled everyone else. I can't tell what I'm thinking. Reason tells me that those apartment rules are nonsense. We are now in a society ruled by law. But my body keeps shaking and my voice becomes hoarse, just like the instinct of herbivores to fear wild beasts. I began to regret moving into this apartment. Yuma saw that I looked ugly and shouted at Jiang Lin, "We didn't say we wanted to listen, why did you turn it on?" Jiang Lin was also scared and hurriedly turned off the radio program, and his expression was not as frivolous as before. "My aunt, can't I stop joking with you? Why are you so serious?" The room became quiet as soon as the radio was turned off. Yuma took out her mobile phone and showed the 2 boys the apartment rules she had just received. Jiang Lin laughed foolishly, fell on the sofa and said, "Such a vulgar way of playing, you also believe it? It's all a joke." Xiaoyan was silent at the side. He was a calm science and engineering man. He read the content carefully and said, "I also don't think it is credible." I bit my pale lips tightly, frowned and sweated unconsciously. Even if they said so, I still felt something was wrong. Yuma looked at me and asked with some concern, "Qing Qian, are you okay?" I opened my mouth and was about to speak when I heard a strange radio sound, which seemed to come from some speaker. Welcome to Listen to Your Moon, my heart. My whole body felt like it was electrocuted, and my hair stood up. Yuma gave Jianglin a fierce look. Didn't you tell me to turn off the radio a long time ago? Why are you still on? Xiaoyan raised his phone in a surrender gesture. Miss, don't accuse the good people. I turned off the radio when I was criticized just now. The sound is not from my phone. I pricked up my ears and listened carefully. The sound seemed to be not in the house, but outside the corridor, and it was getting closer and closer. It was like someone was carrying a speaker and getting closer to us. Now it sounded so loud that it sounded like the speaker of the radio was close to our door. Bang, bang, bang. There were several violent bangs from the door without any warning. Each one seemed to hit my heart and made me tremble. The faces of several people in the room changed, and the atmosphere dropped to freezing point in an instant. The beast-like bangs continued, and Jiang Lin's face turned pale. Xiaoyan frowned and got up to check. I called him with a sullen face, don't. It's too late, keep your current posture and don't move. Apartment Rule 1, at any time, please do not listen to the radio hosted by Teacher Zeng. If you accidentally listen, please keep your posture unchanged until he leaves. Bang! With the last bang, the sound of the radio entered our ears without any obstruction. The door was knocked open. I stared at him with wide eyes. I felt my breathing stagnate, my brain was blank, and I couldn't even scream out of fear. What is that? The sound of the radio station continued. Welcome to Listen to Your Moon, my heart. I am your host, Mr. Zeng. But this time, the sound was close to my ears. After the last bang, the door was knocked open. I can't describe what came in. I just felt that it was a horror I had never seen before. At first glance, it was indeed a humanoid creature, but he was gray all over, his skin looked very smooth, there was no hair, and his limbs were bent at the joints, just like the common dog's leg structure. In addition to his body, the most incredible thing about him was his face. He had no eyes. Where the eyes should have been, there were two huge white speakers instead. The tail of the speaker seemed to be embedded in the flesh and tightly wrapped by the eye sockets. The sound of the radio came from the speaker. The sound was repeated and deafening. The horn kept vibrating under the blessing of the sound. Welcome to Listen to Your Moon, my heart. We were all frightened and dared not move. It turned out that the rules were true. The horn monster seemed to be unable to see static things. He leaned into the house and kept rising and falling to sniff the air. Xiaoyan was closest to the door. I saw that his forehead was covered with sweat and his whole body was as tight as lead. The horn sniffed around Xiaoyan and found nothing unusual, so he walked towards me and Yuma again. I held Yuma's hand tightly, and my palms were sweating. The trumpet monster was too close to us, and the sound from the trumpet was almost loud enough to deafen us. Only then did I notice that the trumpet monster had no mouth at all. His entire mouth seemed to be twisted up, and the spiral folds on it were tightly sealed. In other words, there was no respiratory organ on the face of this thing, and only two big trumpets could be seen. Is this still a creature on Earth? The moment he approached, I almost held my breath, fearing that the slightest movement would attract his attention. He bent his body, lurking at the position of our legs like a ghost, and then moved towards the sofa. Jiang Lin was on the sofa. He was a little worse than us, and he was still in a surrender posture with his hands raised. I couldn't stand it from the beginning, and my hands were sore and trembling slightly. Seeing the trumpet monster gradually approaching, Jiang Lin's face turned pale, his legs began to tremble, and my heart was instantly raised to my throat. I was afraid that Jiang Lin couldn't hold on, and sure enough, Jiang Lin's arms raised up began to shake violently like a sieve. He was completely limp, and even the yellow liquid from incontinence flowed down between his legs. Don't kill me, don't kill me. He really couldn't hold it anymore, and Jiang Lin wanted to run without caring about so much. The whole body of the trumpet monster straightened up as if receiving a signal. At this time, I noticed that there were two sharp blades on his forearm, and he raised his forearm high to chop Jiang Lin. My brain was boiling instantly, my heart was beating wildly, and I gritted my teeth and yelled at Jiang Lin, throw the phone out. According to the reaction of the trumpet monster and the rules, I boldly guessed that the trumpet monster would only attack moving things for some reason. Jiang Lin reacted and immediately did it, and threw the phone to the balcony with force. A cold light flashed, and the phone was split in half. The trumpet monster jumped hard and followed the phone out of the balcony. Jiang Lin panted heavily and turned his head to look at us. After surviving the disaster, he showed a long-lost smile. But at the moment when Jiang Lin turned around, Yuemo screamed as if from the depths of his soul. Jiang Lin froze. As Yuemo lowered his gaze, only Jiang Lin's upper body turned around, and his lower body remained in place. Jiang Lin was cut in half, just like the ancient beheading. The horn monster was too fast, and in an instant Jiang Lin was split into two halves, just like his mobile phone. He looked down at his body, then looked up at us. His whole face was extremely distorted. Saliva and tears flowed out together, his hands waved weakly, and a gurgling scream came from his throat. The three of us looked at Jiang Lin, and our hair stood up. Yuemo was completely limp, and he knelt down and couldn't say a word. I also covered my mouth, and my stomach was churning. Although there was nothing in my stomach, I vomited all over the floor under this extreme stimulation. Call the police. Call the emergency number. I wiped the corner of my mouth, and subconsciously wanted to go to Jiang Lin. But we all know that even a miracle doctor can't help in that situation. Xiaoyan behind us finally spoke, his eyes flashing, frowning and staring at Jiang Lin, his drooping hands shaking uncontrollably. We are on the 33rd floor. Did you hear the sound when that thing jumped down? My heart skipped a beat. The trumpet monster is bigger than a person, and even if a person fell, it would definitely be a loud noise, not like this silent. I rushed to the balcony and looked down. It was pitch black downstairs, not even a street lamp, and the bottomless place seemed like a huge mouth of the abyss. I turned around and looked at Xiaoyan, my pupils trembling slightly. What do you mean? Xiaoyan's expression was not as good as mine. I don't know if you can believe it, maybe this is not our world. Hearing this, Yuma couldn't stand it anymore, kneeling on the ground and wailing in despair. Just a second ago, the twisted Jiang Lin died. He struggled for a long time, looking at himself cut into half, and died in desperate fear, with his eyes open. I knelt down and hugged Yuma tightly and said, Yuma, cheer up, if you can get in, you can get out, believe me, we will get out. I subconsciously looked up at Xiaoyan, hoping to find some psychological support. But at this moment, his eyes were full of despair, even though he had always been rational. His lips trembled slightly, and he murmured to himself, no one can get out. We moved Jiang Lin to the bedroom, locked the balcony, and sealed the doors and windows. Even though we knew that this would be useless against those monsters. But as humans, we still wanted to seek some sense of security. I think that monster used its trumpet-like eyes to determine our location based on sound waves, similar to bats. If we can figure this out, maybe we can survive for a while. Xiaoyan sat on the sofa and took a deep puff of cigarette. We calmed down a little and began to analyze the situation. Yuma was wrapped in a blanket, but her body still couldn't stop shaking. I smiled dryly, but according to the apartment rules, there might be other monsters, maybe stronger than that trumpet monster. It's too difficult to survive, and there's one more thing. Xiaoyan bit his thumbnail and said, food, we have no food. This is what I'm most worried about, we have to go out to find food. But we don't know what else is in the apartment. Dong 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 dong. At this moment, the door rang, and the rapid sound provoked our tense nerves. Yuma held my arm tightly, trembling. Qing Qian, what is this? I was scared, but I still kept calm. According to the apartment rules, as long as someone knocks on the door, there might not be any big problem. At present, respecting the apartment rules will not put your life in danger. I bravely stepped forward and wanted to go to the peephole to take a look. This time, Huan Xiaoyan held my arm and said seriously, don't go. He obviously remembered the apartment rules. Article 5 of the apartment rules said that you can open the door to someone who knocks on the door, but don't forget that Article 9 of the apartment rules does not allow for trial and error. Article 9 of the apartment rules, one of the above rules is false. I bit my pale lips and kept silent. All this is like a game played by the superiors. Whether to move forward is not something we can influence by retreating. It is inevitable. I gritted my teeth and decided to look at the situation through the peephole first. Outside the door were two people I was very familiar with. They were covered in blood and anxiously banging on the door. Yuma, Qingqian, open the door quickly. This apartment is not normal. Open the door quickly, we have to leave here. My scalp was numb and my whole body was stiff. The huge fear was like a branch that tightly wrapped around me, a small flying insect. Jiang Lin and Xiao Yan were outside the door. They were outside, but who was Xiao Yan behind me? In the moment when my mind was blank, I began to recall the fourth rule of the apartment. Don't open the door to anyone who rings the doorbell. What you see may not be true. Jiang Lin and Xiao Yan rang the doorbell when they entered the house for the first time, but I didn't realize the seriousness of the matter at that time. After I found out from the cat's eye that it was them, the doorbell turned into a knock on the door, so I relaxed my vigilance and opened the door for them. Those things are very confusing. What you see from the cat's eye is not necessarily true. It is confusing, so changing from ringing the doorbell to knocking on the door is a means of confusing people? My chest rose and fell, my heart beat violently, and I could feel the person behind me approaching, getting closer and closer, like a monster silently. Xiao Yan patted my shoulder behind me, and I was shocked. I looked up at him with trembling eyes. Xiao Yan stared at my eyes with a strange expression, and his mouth opened like two worms. Who is outside? My sweat-soaked back pressed tightly against the door. Just when I wanted to say something, I heard Yuma screaming hysterically. When I rushed over, Yuma knelt at the door of the bedroom, shaking uncontrollably, holding her hair tightly with both hands. Impossible, possible, this is the 33rd floor, how is it possible? Following Yuma's line of sight, I was also stunned. The originally wrapped body of Jiang Lin disappeared, and there was no blood on the bed. Everything was as clean as new, as if nothing had happened. But the bloody memory and the horn monster were clearly not long ago, just experienced. I stared at everything in front of me with wide eyes, as if everything had come true. Jiang Lin's matter can only explain that he was something that did not exist in the first place, and it was a deceptive trick. I heard footsteps behind me, which were Xiao Yan's, and he held the bedside lamp tightly in his hand. I protected Yuma behind me, turned around suddenly, pointed the lamp at the approaching Xiao Yan, panting heavily, and asked him with cold sweat on his forehead, "What on earth are you?" Xiao Yan raised his hand slightly, and said calmly, "Don't get excited, I saw something outside, those are used to confuse us, don't believe it." My nerves were tense, and I couldn't tell the truth from the false. How can you prove it? Then where did Jiang Lin's body go? How come there is not even a trace of blood here? Xiao Yan said calmly, "It can only mean that this place is not safe either. Everything is like a game of the superior." I stared at Xiao Yan with wide eyes, and his thoughts coincided with mine. But I still didn't dare to let my guard down, and Xiao Yan also tactfully retreated slowly. "You don't believe me, I can understand, but I guess you will understand it soon." Sure enough, as soon as Xiao Yan finished speaking, the knocking sound of the two people outside changed from the initial rapid knocking to a strong bang. The door was already broken by the horn monster, and it was just propped up with a chair, and it was even more shaky this time. I saw the gap in the door was getting bigger and bigger, and it was just one last hit. Through the crack in the door, I looked at the people outside. Their eyes were red and bloodshot, like zombies, hysterically trying to break in. My heart tightened, and I shouted to the house, "Come and block the door." The three of us pressed against the door tightly, gritting our teeth and not daring to relax at all. I don't know how long it took, and the movement at the door finally disappeared. Yuma and I were instantly paralyzed, and all our clothes were soaked with cold sweat. I looked up at Xiao Yan with a complicated look. My suspicion of him still hasn't disappeared, and now this suspicion has become more complicated. I always feel that he knows something. We don't know. Yuma asked me with tears in her eyes, "What should Qingqian do now?" "I don't want to die. It's absolutely unsafe at home now. If we want to escape, we must find the so-called safe house and the rules. I found some handy self-defense items at home. I threw a baseball bat to Xiaoyan, moved the chair, opened the door and looked at the corridor outside, shook my head at him and said, "You, take the lead. Everything in the corridor is normal, and there is no difference from an ordinary corridor." Yuma held my arm tightly, with fear in his eyes. Our building has 36 floors, and there are 6 rooms on each floor. In this case, can we find any safe house? I bit my lip and said nothing, carefully observing the movements around. Yuma was right, we couldn't find them one by one. Those unknown monsters would not give us this opportunity. There is a person there. Xiaoyan, who was walking in the front, suddenly stopped, and the atmosphere became tense. Following his line of sight, a woman stood under the light of the corridor. She had disheveled hair and was facing away from us, with her head drooping, like a sculpture, motionless. Such a guy, no matter how you look at it, doesn't look like a normal person trapped in the apartment like us. What should we do if we encounter dirty things again? Xiaoyan turned his head to look at me. The position of that strange woman was very special, just blocking the elevator entrance, and not far from the elevator entrance was the stairs of the safety passage. In other words, she just blocked all our ways out. There was no other way, and there was a hint of determination in my eyes. Instead of doing nothing, it's better to take a gamble. Let's go and try not to make any noise. Umo bit her pale lips and nodded with difficulty, and Xiaoyan also nodded. It seems that our ideas coincide again this time. The 3 of us lined up in a column, with Xiaoyan leading the way and me in the middle. In order to prevent any accidents, we stood a little distance away from each other, so that one person's accident would not affect the other 2. The woman was like a sculpture. Even when we passed by her, she remained motionless, with her head drooped, and her dirty, yellow hair covered her entire face. We said nothing, slowed down our pace, and walked past the woman according to the planned route. Fortunately, there was no danger along the way. Xiaoyan and I both entered the fire escape, except Yuma. According to our pace, she will be fine. Just as Yuma took the first step into the stairwell, the elevator made a strange clicking sound of the chain, followed by a ding-dong sound. The elevator started to work and opened the door on the 33rd floor. But why? We originally planned to go downstairs from the fire escape. Why did the elevator open the door on its own initiative? I turned my head slowly with my stiff body, and the elevator behind Yuma became the door of hell, glaring like a monster's mouth. Even though I tried to stay calm, the fear had reached its peak at this moment. My lips trembled and I whispered to comfort her, "Yuma, don't be afraid, don't look back." Yuma's whole body trembled like a sieve, and uncontrollable sobbing came out of his mouth. The weird woman under the electric light slowly approached Yuma. Then the fishy, wet and hot breath sprayed on Yuma's cheek without reservation. Yuma couldn't stand it anymore and screamed, subconsciously turning back. It was that woman, the woman under the light. Activated by the sound, she seemed to be connected to the power supply and began to move. Her whole face was distorted. Under the loose hair, her eyes were as big as goose eggs, with the white of the eyes accounting for most of the eyes, and only a small black pupil condensed in the middle of the eyes. The mouth was cracked, almost occupying most of the face, full of sharp and delicate teeth like thumbtacks, and saliva oozing from the cracked mouth corners. Tick, tick, dripping on Yuma's shoulders. Yuma couldn't stand it anymore, and rushed downstairs with a howl. In those few short seconds, the alarm bells in my heart rang loudly. It seems that there is a rule that says not to disturb Sister Ife, who is meditating in the corridor. If she finds you, you can try to race with her, but I don't recommend it. You can't run, you must not run when you meet this monster. But it was too late. I heard the rift monster staring at Yumo's back and giggling. Then she waved her arms and ran towards us with a posture that was 100 times more exaggerated than that of a 100-meter sprinter. That weird laughter was weird and terrifying, echoing throughout the stairwell. My mind was blank, but my body had already reacted. I didn't want to break the rules, but now I could only run, there was no way back. I didn't expect the rift monster to run so fast. When I was about to reach the 25th floor, she jumped up from behind me and climbed onto my body, and began to gnaw my head with her sharp teeth. I could feel countless sharp foreign objects piercing my skin, trying to invade my brain. My vision gradually became blurred. The tearing pain made me tremble all over, without any strength to fight back, and I screamed miserably. Umo, who had already run far away, suddenly rushed up. She was so timid and scared that she actually stepped forward and grabbed the rift monster's hair tightly and said, "Stay away from Qing Qian." There was some hesitation in Xiaoyan's eyes. I don't blame him, I can even understand him. As long as he can take Yuma away, it doesn't matter if I die. Xiaoyan scolded him, but decided to compromise with Shani. He gritted his teeth, picked up an iron fire tongs from the ground next to him, roared, and stabbed the fire tongs into the eyes of the rift monster. Yuma and I were stunned by the outburst of the weak scholar. There was no time to say more. While the rift monster was howling, Yuma dragged me out of the rift monster's hand. We lost our balance and rolled several times on the stairs. The fire tongs did not restrain the rift monster for too long. She bit in the air, trying to vent her anger. We had no way out, but at this moment, the rift monster looked up at the floor sign in the stairwell. Her face changed instantly, and finally she even screamed, whimpered, turned around and ran away. I used my last strength to look up in the direction the rift monster had just looked at. We just rolled down a few steps and came directly to the 25th floor. A huge fear was like a haze hanging over my head. "This means that we have entered the territory of other monsters," Xiaoyan said coldly. "That monster will be more powerful than the ugly monster in the crack," so she ran away because of fear and instinct. I don't know if I was scared silly, under extreme fear and physical pain. I actually laughed dryly twice. It turns out that monsters are also divided into classes. Even in other time and space, they can't escape the fate of NPCs. After arriving at the 25th floor, we found that we couldn't find a place to go downstairs at all. There was no elevator room or stairwell. The whole corridor formed a closed loop from beginning to end. From the beginning, the discomfort of the body became more and more intense. In the end, the three of us decided that Xiaoyan and Yuma would go together to find a way out or available food. And I stayed there alone to rest and wait for them to come back. I couldn't help but feel sad. I was injured, and it would be difficult to run even if I wanted to. Besides, this apartment was full of dangers, and it would be difficult for even healthy people to escape. Not long after Xiaoyan and Yuma left. Tick 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 dash. Looking up, bright red liquid began to drip from the ceiling, followed by countless fine red rain. The red rain kept falling, and soon my clothes were soaked, my vision became blurred and bright red, and I felt nauseous. Without time to think about it, I pushed open the door of a room and wanted to go in to hide from the rain, but the moment the door opened, a strong sense of familiarity hit me. My eyes widened, and my heart was extremely shocked. The scene in the room in front of me was the same as the house we rented on the 33rd floor. My heart was beating wildly, and my breathing became more and more rapid. Is every room in this apartment exactly the same? And we are just like Truman, who is ignorant, going around in circles in the set world. I was a little crazy, my head was buzzing. I endured the pain in my body and rushed out of the room and returned to the corridor, pushing open the doors of the rooms one by one. They were exactly the same, all exactly the same. I was sweating coldly on my back, and the red rain was sticky and solidified on my body like blood. It was sticky on every hair of my body like maggots, making me feel extremely sick. I pushed open the last room in the corridor, and the decoration was still exactly the same, but there was one difference. There was a person sitting on the sofa in the room. Strictly speaking, it was not a person, but a corpse. Her whole stomach was cut open, her intestines were pulled out alive and wrapped around her neck. She was strangled to death with her own intestines. She met other monsters in a place I couldn't see. My lips trembled slightly, my mind was blank, and my throat was bitter. I walked forward stiffly and took out the phone from the corpse's hand, which was still on the dialogue box with me. This message had just been edited, and she was dead before she sent it to me. Qing Qian, our apartment is on the 25th floor, room 2512. I'm already there, so don't make the wrong choice. What's going on? What's going on? I stroked her pale cheek with my fingers, feeling hopeless. What's going on with you, Ma? Recalling how I got to the 33rd floor. I met you, Ma, downstairs, and she personally took me upstairs. Apartment Rules Article 8, you have to be careful of your aunt, she's very playful, best at acting, and may be hiding anywhere you can't imagine. My aunt loves acting, and will hide anywhere I can't imagine. So, is it possible that she has been hiding by my side all along? No wonder the elevator on the 33rd floor automatically starts and awakens the rift monster. If everything was done by Yuma at the end, we wouldn't be able to find it without eyes behind us. Why did Yuma save me? Xiaoyan is in danger. Squeak. The door behind me was pushed open without any warning. The voice of the girl who came in was cold and emotionless. Ah, you found me. I told you to stay where you are, why didn't you listen? The person outside the door was not Umo at all, but had the same appearance and voice as Umo. I saw her lift her scalp up, and then a bloody red monster came out from under her inner skin. She had been lying to me from the beginning. She killed Umo and walked with me disguised as Umo. Her body was twisted, like countless red water plants entangled together, her eyes flew upwards, as if she was hanging, she had no teeth in her mouth, her bare gums were covered with blood, and she made a squeaking foolish laugh. She was happy to have deceived me. But I don't understand why she rescued me from the hands of the crack monster. What about Xiaoyan? Did you kill him too? The blood-red monster cracked its mouth, as if it didn't understand, and kept twisting its head. What's your next step? Kill me? I spread my hands and glanced at Umo on the sofa. Do you think I still care? I don't care anymore. I don't want to live anymore after being trapped here by you guys, but I want to know why you saved me. Since you woke up that rift monster and let her eat me, why did you save me? I saw something strange flashing in the red monster's eyes, and it was actually shiny. Its mouth opened slightly, as if it wanted to say something. Just when the blood-red monster and I were in a stalemate, Xiaoyan, covered in blood, appeared again. He jumped up high and hit the blood-red monster's head with a brick, again and again, with a ferocious expression. Xiaoyan, what are you doing? Qing Qian, are you crazy? This thing is a monster on the 25th floor, something that even the rift monster is afraid of. Look at what she has done to me, and you are still protecting her? I opened my mouth and wanted to say something, but I felt my throat was dry and I couldn't say a word. I always felt that something was wrong. Just when I was in a state of confusion, the blood-red monster had broken free from him, jumped up and hit Xiaoyan's face hard. For a while, Xiaoyan screamed and blood kept flowing out of his mouth and nose. Qing Qian, don't worry about it, there is a knife in the drawer, save me, or I will die. Aren't you going out together? My heart was shocked and my pupils dilated. I originally wanted to go out with Yuma, but now there is no chance. I know what's wrong. If it's there, then everything makes sense. But if that's the case, everything will be 100 times more terrifying than I thought. I'm more Truman than Truman. Qing Qian, what are you still struggling with? The blood-red monster sat on Xiaoyan and strangled his neck tightly. If the blood-red claws were to exert a little more force, Xiaoyan would definitely die. Following Xiaoyan's instructions, I took out a knife from the cabinet, and my hands holding the knife shook like sieves. Qing Qian, hurry up. In Xiaoyan's cry for help, I was in a mess. I raised the dagger with a cold light high, and dropped it heavily without hesitation. Only then did I know that monsters don't bleed. Xiaoyan looked at the dagger that was inserted into his chest, his eyes full of depression, but he soon regained his calm. I let go of the dagger and gasped. Fortunately, I guessed right. From the beginning, this game was carried out under Xiaoyan's guidance. Even if Xiaoyan is considered a very smart person, no matter how smart a person is, he cannot foresee something completely unknown. Life is not a novel, there are not so many golden fingers. The point that finally exposed Xiaoyan's problem was naturally the location of this dagger. Xiaoyan had never been here, how could he know that there was a dagger here? Of course, there was a point before that, which made me almost sure that Xiaoyan had a problem. If Yuma, who was with me from beginning to end, was fake from beginning to end, then the 33rd floor was a complete scam from the beginning. So why did Xiaoyan and the others come to the 33rd floor to ring the doorbell at the beginning? There is only one explanation: Xiaoyan was a guy in this building from the beginning. Only in this way can everything be explained. He completely played me in the applause. Xiaoyan kicked the red monster that was pressing on him away and began to applaud. He is worthy of being someone who can survive here for so long. He not only abides by the rules, but also has a lot of brains. You successfully broke the rules. He glanced at the red monster and said, "This thing can disguise itself as anything, but there is one bad thing: it will also carry some of the original owner's feelings." I was a little shocked, so the red monster saved me, because at the same moment, Yuma would make the same choice. My heart sank, and I suddenly felt sad and didn't want to play anymore. What on earth are you? Is it interesting for a group of NPCs to want me alone? How can I leave? Tell me. Xiaoyan looked playful and glanced at Yuma. Yes, we are NPCs, but everyone who enters here is the protagonist. It's just a butterfly effect. Qianni mobilized his whole body. Whether he can survive here depends on everyone's choice. Many people died at the beginning, but you can leave now. I was a little shocked. But the rules asked me to find a safe house, but I didn't see a safe house at all. Don't always use the rules of the outside world to measure here. Whether there is a safe house depends on your own thinking. Find it. This is your last test. My brain is in chaos. The entire 25th floor is a loop. Where should I find a safe house? Suddenly I thought of something: that terrifying abyss. Could the darkest place be the place leading to light? I jumped without hesitation after brushing shoulders with Xiaoyan. I seemed to see the red monster shaking his head with tears and Xiaoyan smiling. But nothing mattered anymore. I fell into the endless darkness, just like the trumpet monster. I didn't know how long I fell. I saw the only light spot. Just like after a long tunnel, the exit finally appeared. 9. I raised my mouth slightly. I won. He thought I was dead. I fell from the 33rd floor, broke into a pool of meat. Countless people surrounded me and screamed. I wanted to move now. It was too ugly and too embarrassed, but I was just a pool of meat. I jumped out of the vortex of the rules of the love apartment. I was dead. In the few seconds of consciousness, I repeatedly thought about where the problem was. I clearly followed all the rules. Why did I die? I suddenly thought of the one rule that I didn't follow among all the rules. Apartment Rules Article 6. After entering the apartment, please do not lie. It is very important to remember this. I have never lied to anyone, but from the moment we planned to enter the apartment, we had a huge lie to matchmake. Love apartment: couples move in, rent is halved, water and electricity are free. So those of us who pretend to be couples and want to rent a cheap house will die from the beginning. There is no point in me surviving to the last level. Everything is in vain. Thinking of this, I closed my eyes. It turned out that I had been broken a long time ago, and there was no eye at all. There was only one eye that splashed under the car and was crushed. Extra. Xiaoyan looked up, tooted twice, and kicked the red monster hard again. You, don't stop it. Isn't it good for a good seedling to come and work for me? Young people should not be too high-minded. What's wrong with being an NPC in society? Don't have too many ideas of your own. Being an NPC is better than starving to death. Xiaoyan grabbed the red monster on the ground. Don't hesitate, a new batch of college students are coming. Pack up and receive guests. Not long after Yuma entered the room on the 25th floor, there was a knock on the door. Outside the door was a foreign painter who called himself Guanggu, who said he wanted to paint a portrait for Yuma. If I can't paint well, I will commit suicide by disembowelment. Yuma thought he was interesting and agreed. But Yuma forgot the third rule of the apartment: stay away from foreign painters who talk about committing suicide by disembowelment. If you have already contacted him, don't communicate with him, close your eyes and mouth, and leave quickly. Guanggu painted a picture and was not satisfied with it. He tore up the portrait and became a little irritable, with dirty words in his mouth. I commit suicide by disembowelment. Yuma finally realized that something was wrong at this time. Don't get excited, don't do stupid things to hurt yourself. Looking at Yuma, Guangu smiled, well, then I will disembowel you to apologize. The end. A woman grew out of the well in Saishu village. But she had no limbs, only a lonely head and upper body floating on the water. At first, people were very scared and no one dared to approach. Until one rainstorm, the pool was washed away and the woman fell out. The stunningly beautiful face was placed in front of everyone. That night, my brother took a few brothers and went to the well quietly. My brother didn't come back until the early morning of the next day. He was tying his belt while walking. He kicked me in the stomach and I knelt on the spot in pain. The scene I just saw with my own eyes instantly appeared in my mind. The woman in the well was fished out by them. The severe pain of tearing her scalp made her scream. But my brother was not afraid, but looked even more excited. It's a pity that she has no lower body when she looks so beautiful. One of the men was full of regret. Perhaps she realized what was going to happen. Her expression was tinged with fear, and the next second my brother pried her mouth open, and the woman bit his wrist with all her strength. My brother screamed, slapped her several times in anger, and said, "You dare to bite me? You monster, it's your blessing to be favored by me." After saying that, he seemed to have thought of something, and said to his friend next to him, "Bring a pair of pliers." Soon, there was a heart-wrenching scream from the other end of the well, and the woman's teeth were pulled out. Looking at them queuing up to enjoy, I couldn't tell who was the monster. While my brother went to sleep, I hurried out and returned to the well. The woman was thrown aside at this moment, her face covered with blood. "Water, water," she murmured with her eyes closed. "So she can speak?" I quickly took a bucket of water from the well and put the woman in it. Like a fish swimming ashore, she slowly regained consciousness when she returned to the water. "Are you a human or a ghost?" I couldn't help but sigh at the beautiful woman in front of me. She didn't answer my question, but just looked straight into my eyes. "You saved me, I can fulfill one of your wishes, no matter what." I was stunned and murmured, "Is it possible to do anything?" The woman nodded, her charming eyes seemed to be able to eat people's hearts. I pondered for a long time, then leaned over and whispered a few words in her ear. She was not surprised, as if she had expected it, and said, "Everything will be as you wish." The stinky girl didn't get up yet. My father opened my quilt, pulled my hair, and dragged me to the ground. "Your brother and I are starving to death, hurry up and cook." I took a deep breath and dragged my tired body to scoop rice. After a while, I heard a commotion outside. "Zhangxing, tell me the truth, are you hooking up with this goblin?" Aunt Zhang next door was angrily pointing at the woman in the well and questioning Uncle Zhang. "Absolutely not, you misunderstood, how could I like her when she is like this? I am not that bad." As soon as this was said, a trace of guilt appeared on my brother's face. Aunt Zhang picked up the woman from the well and threw her to the ground. "Then prove to me that you have nothing to do with this goblin." Uncle Zhang hesitated for a while, then picked up the stick next to him and hit the woman hard a few times. Aunt Zhang's expression eased a lot. Then he said, "This woman is basically a goblin who seduces people. If she stays here, she will definitely harm the whole village." "Yes, and because of her presence, we can only run to the mountains to fetch water these days. I am afraid that this well will be stinky because of her." Another big sister in the village echoed. At this time, the woman on the ground suddenly laughed, and her seaweed-like hair covered the woman's face, revealing only a bright red lip. Chuckling. The laughter was extremely weird, and I couldn't help but get goosebumps all over my body. "In the past few nights, countless people have come to see me. You should be the only ones who know what they did. Do you want me to read out their names one by one?" As soon as these words came out, the surroundings fell into a dead silence. They didn't expect that this woman could actually speak. "What are you talking about, stinky woman?" My brother rushed forward and kicked her in the face. She is clearly bewitching people. Yes, who knows what kind of monster this thing of unknown origin is. Throw her out of the village quickly. Several men echoed. Throw? I'm afraid you have to kill her. Aunt Zhang narrowed her eyes and looked indifferent. The harder she beats, the more she can prove that she is innocent with this monster. A man said weakly, this is not good, right? You are not really confused by this woman, are you? If your mother knew that her son was with the monster, she would jump into the river. What are you talking about? My father sighed and interrupted their speeches. He took a butcher knife from home, walked to the woman and said, I'm sorry, I'm doing this for the good of the village. The next second, the knife stabbed into the woman's back fiercely. The men lined up and stabbed holes in the woman's body one by one, as if to prove that they had done nothing. My brother's expression was a bit regretful, but he still took the knife and stabbed it into the woman's eyes fiercely. The screams echoed in my ears again and again, but I was powerless. When I looked into the woman's other eye, she suddenly smiled, as if telling me that my wish would come true soon. The woman died, and her body lay quietly there. Everyone applauded, except for Granny Lu, who was standing in the distance. According to the villagers, Granny Lu was a witch who could see ghosts. Because she dealt with ghosts all year round, she was so gloomy that people were afraid. Although she was responsible for settling all the strange things that happened in the village in the early years, people were always afraid of unknown things, so no villager dared to approach her, especially after her daughter died. The older generation said that she was possessed by a ghost and killed her daughter. Since then, the villagers have treated her like a plague god and hide when they see her. But only I know how good she is. I am afraid she is the only person in the whole village who is really good to me. It's going to change. She closed her eyes and trembled all over. I quickly held her hand and worriedly said, Are you okay, Granny Lu? She looked at me straight and said something that scared me, Run away, Yunyan, the farther you run, the better. There will be no living breath in this village soon. My father shouted at me from a distance, Jiang Yunyan, go and deal with the body. In order not to be beaten, I had to put the woman in a sack and dragged her to the back mountain to bury her. Wait a minute, give me the woman. My brother's voice came from behind me. I squeezed the sack tightly and had a bad premonition. Don't worry about it. Do you believe that you will be the next one to be buried? If a person like Jiang Gang goes crazy, he can do anything. I had no choice but to hand the sack to him. He took the woman out, his eyes full of pity. TSK, such a beautiful woman is dead. Then he pulled out a knife from his back and chopped straight at the woman. You? Could it be? I covered my mouth and looked at him in shock. After working for a long time, my brother put the woman's head into a bag. Then he threatened me fiercely and said, If you dare to tell anyone about what happened today, you will die, understand? I nodded and didn't say anything. I could guess why he did this. Sometimes people are more like monsters than monsters. The next day, something strange happened. The people in the village were covered with fish scales all over their bodies. When the scales were peeled off, they were full of wet juice. The fishy smell of fish spread throughout the village. And the well that always had water was now filled with dead fish of all sizes. My father saw that I was fine, dragged me to the ground and yelled, Did you poison the whole village? Why are you the only one who doesn't have this strange thing? Tell me. I cried in pain and said, I don't have it. Everyone looked at me covetously, as if they would eat me up in the next second. I shouted, It was that woman, it must be that woman who cursed you. My father seemed to have thought of something, and suddenly knelt down at the feet of the richest landlord in the village, Zhao, and said, Don't you know the Master Zhang in the temple? Invite him down to save everyone? Landlord Zhao was also very anxious, so he went up the mountain to invite the retired master down. Soon, a monk in a cassock came to the village. He looked around and then said in shock, You are clearly haunted by the fish mother. Fish mother? What is a fish mother? The monk sighed and said, Tell me the truth, has a woman died in the village recently? My father was shocked and nodded in panic. That woman was sent down from heaven to protect the fish mother in the village, but you killed her. What a sin! As soon as these words came out, the whole village looked ashen. But, there is a solution. Landlord Zhao scratched the fish scales on his body, which were extremely itchy, and his body was already covered with blood. Master, please save everyone. I will agree to whatever you want. The monk closed his eyes and spoke slowly. If you want to resolve the resentment, you have to find the root of the resentment. Who is the mastermind who killed the fish mother? Everyone looked at each other, not daring to speak. At this time, I don't know who said that it was Aunt Zhang who said that she wanted to kill Yu's mother. As soon as this was said, all the men around began to echo, yes, yes, it's that bad woman. I said not to kill her, but she really harmed the whole village. Aunt Zhang was frightened and fell to the ground. The monk looked at Aunt Zhang and curled his lips and said, prepare 4 strong bulls to tie her hands and feet, and execute her immediately at noon. I was shocked. This is clearly to make Aunt Zhang the next fish mother. After a while, Aunt Zhang was tied up by everyone, and Uncle Zhang was anxiously shouting beside him, but no one paid attention to him. At that time, I said to kill that woman, and you all agreed, but now you put everything on my head. When the villagers heard this, they all turned their heads away. Seeing this, my father quickly stuffed a rag into Aunt Zhang's mouth. Several big men brought 4 cows from a distance and tied Aunt Zhang's hands and feet to the cows with ropes. Uncle Zhang knelt on the ground and begged for mercy. My God, you are going to let her die. My brother kicked him hard and said, shut up. Didn't you hear the master's words? Have you forgotten what you did to the fish mother? Upon hearing this, Uncle Zhang immediately shut up and knelt aside with a dull look. The monk walked slowly to the front of Aunt Zhang, looking at her struggling with an indifferent face. He picked up the Buddhist beads and chanted a mantra. After a while, he shouted to the sky, it's noon, execution. Several big men hit the cows with sticks, and the injured strong cows were scared and fled everywhere. Aunt Zhang kept making whining sounds, but no one saved her. With a click, her legs and arms were torn off, and blood instantly splashed onto the faces of the villagers. I touched my face, feeling indescribable fear in my heart. The cold eyes of the villagers around me seemed to be looking at an insignificant animal instead of a person. The monk wiped the Buddhist beads with his sleeves, closed his eyes and began to chant, Fish Mother Goddess, we have offered you the bodies of sinners, and we hope you will be magnanimous and let these kind villagers live. As soon as the words were finished, countless white maggots began to emerge from the scales on Aunt Zhang's body, and soon the torso was eaten clean by the worms, leaving only bones. And at this moment, someone next to him shouted, the scales on the body disappeared, we are saved. It was magical, as if it was really a divine appearance, and the villager's skin gradually got better. Thank you, Master. Thank you, Master. My father knelt in front of the monk and kowtowed several times, and several villagers also knelt down to the monk one after another. The monk looked at the landlord Zhao and slowly said, don't forget what you promised me. When the landlord Zhao heard this, he immediately put on a weird expression and replied, of course, I will do it. That night, the whole village held a celebration banquet, and the white bones that had been gnawed clean were thrown into the furnace mercilessly. But no one would have thought that the monk would die by the well the next day, with no limbs, covered with fish scales, and a penis stuffed in his mouth. Under him lay a naked male corpse with traces of all sizes. I recognized it at a glance. This was one of my brother's good brothers. It's not difficult to guess that this man was chosen by the landlord Zhao and given to the monk as a pet. After the monk died, everyone was scared out of their wits. My brother swallowed his saliva and inexplicably began to look at his arms. I noticed that the scales were slowly growing again. What to do? It must be that the mother fish's resentment could not be resolved and killed the master. Landlord Zhao was chewing his fingers and walking around anxiously. My dad was scratching his face, and the scales kept falling down like dandruff, and he didn't stop until his face was covered with blood. Suddenly, as if he had thought of something, he rushed over and grabbed my hair and said, I don't believe that the fish mother will be merciful and let you go. Explain to me clearly, Otherwise you will be sent down to accompany your mother tonight. He punched and kicked me again and again, but the villagers around him seemed to be accustomed to it and watched the farce in front of them coldly. Granny Lu hunched her back and staggered out from a distance and said, "Don't hit it. It's not just yin yin. I don't have this strange disease. It was the Buddha pendant I gave her that protected her." I was stunned and reached out to touch the pendant on my neck. This was something Granny Lu gave me a few years ago, saying that it could save my life at a critical moment. I thought it was really the fish mother who let me live, but I didn't expect that it was Granny Lu who saved me. My dad let go of the hand that was pulling my hair and finally calmed down. Most of the villagers were a little afraid of Granny Lu. They always felt that the witch in front of them would do something that was against the will of heaven and earth, so almost no one would take the initiative to find her. My dad cleared his phlegm and said carefully, "Granny Lu, if you can save my daughter, then other villagers should be able to save her too, right? I know you have boundless magical powers and a kind heart. You will definitely help us find a way, right?" Granny Lu sighed, took my hand, and said softly, "Where did you bury the fish mother? Take me to see it." I was frightened and broke into a cold sweat. Yunmu was now only half of her body. When they saw the body, wouldn't my brother be exposed? "You stinky girl, hurry up and tell me." There was no other way, so I had to take everyone up the mountain. Several villagers jointly dug up the grave. The moment I saw the body, I was almost paralyzed on the spot. The head that my brother had hidden was actually intact and returned, and the beautiful face seemed to be able to capture people's hearts. What was even more strange was that the originally incomplete body actually grew complete limbs, and all the injuries on the body disappeared completely. My brother was trembling with fear, and his face was extremely terrible. Granny Lu stared at the corpse with a heavy face and said, "Help me prepare a bowl of chicken blood and a basin of fresh fish." My father immediately asked someone to do it after hearing it. Granny Lu went home to get the things needed for the ceremony. I followed her with a very depressed expression. She stopped and turned around to look at me and asked, "What's wrong? Is Yin Yan unhappy?" I lowered my head and said with a very sad expression, "Granny Lu, why did you save them? You know how bad those people are. They usually do a lot of evil. Isn't it good for them all to die?" I finally said my true feelings. I hope all of them will die tragically in this village. 3 years ago, I was bullied by the son of the landlord Zhao. I desperately called for help and struggled with all my strength, but what I got in return was more unscrupulous torture. When I walked down the mountain with scars all over my body, I found that the group of villagers were already waiting at the foot of the mountain. Everyone whispered, and those pairs of eyes seemed to be saying that I took the initiative to find the landlord's son. All of them knew what had just happened, but no one came to save me, including my father and my brother. "I want to call the police." As soon as I said this, my father's fist fell down. "It's your blessing that the son of the Zhao family can like you, but you dare to call the police. Everyone knows that you took the initiative, just like your mother." This sentence instantly reminded me of the poor woman who was beaten to death. When I was young, the landlord Zhao took a fancy to my mother and forced her to commit crimes, but she swore to die and tried to run back home. The final result was that the landlord Zhao's wife brought a group of people to prove that my mother was a bad woman and a shameless woman. That night, they beat my mother's thin body with sticks again and again until she died completely. No one pitied her, no one. Perhaps I still had a glimmer of luck. After I ran away from home, I went door to door to ask the villagers to help me testify. I thought at least one person would help me, but no one did. The son of the landlord Zhao threw several stacks of money on the ground and said with disdain, "Stop while you are ahead, no one in this village will stand on your side." I don't know if it was God's pity on me or the retribution came too quickly. The son of the Zhao family suddenly had a heart attack and bit all the dogs in the family to death. In the end, he used a knife to cut open his belly and pulled out all those things. The landlord Zhao's family was in great pain, but in order to continue the incense, they had to look for ways to continue to have a boy. After a long time, they finally got pregnant with the second child a few months ago. Granny Lu in front of me sighed, touched my head and said, Yun Yin, I know you hate them, but this is so many lives after all. When this matter is over smoothly, Granny will take you away from this village and never come back." My pupils lit up and asked, "Really?" Granny Lu nodded. "Ever since my Kingwazi died unexpectedly, you often come to take care of Granny. I know you are afraid that I will do something stupid. Granny sees all these thoughts. From then on, I regarded you as my second granddaughter, so I will definitely take you away." Tears soaked my eyes, and I hugged her with emotion. In this terrible village, the only person who was kind to me was Granny Lu. At night, Granny Lu soaked 2 ropes tied with bells and chicken blood and tied them to her hands and feet. Then she used a knife to cut open her belly and stuff the fishes into it. When the belly of the fish mother was getting bigger and bigger, Granny Lu cut open her palm and squeezed out blood and dripped it on it. The magical thing was that the place cut by the sharp blade healed very quickly. She raised the bell and circled around the corpse, singing a song that I couldn't understand. Suddenly, the woman opened her eyes and made a terrible cry. The surrounding villagers were all so scared that they dared not move. Granny Lu shouted to everyone, "Don't look her in the eye." The others quickly closed their eyes, fearing that the fish mother would rush over and kill them at this moment. Soon, the heart-wrenching screams stopped. Granny Lu took a deep breath and said to everyone, "Someone needs to be here tonight to guard the fish mother. Don't make any mistakes. If you get through tonight smoothly, her resentment will be resolved and everyone's strange diseases will be cured. Remember not to untie the bell on her body. Once the bell is broken, the fish mother will turn into a fierce ghost and take the lives of the whole village." Hearing this, my father quickly pushed me out and said, "You are the only one who is fine in the village except Granny Lu. Of course, you will guard the body of the fish mother." I was shocked and quickly stepped back a few steps and asked, "What if I am killed by her?" As soon as I finished speaking, my father grabbed my neck and said, "If you guard it to death, it will also contribute to the village. You should be happy." Granny Lu grabbed my father's hand and said with an unhappy face, "If something happens to Yun Yin, I will not help you again." My father let go of my neck in a bad mood and stopped talking. Granny Lu put her hand on my shoulder and said kindly, "Don't worry, child. As long as the bell is not untied, the fish mother can't hurt anyone. Remember, don't trust anyone except me, understand?" I nodded and kept Granny Lu's words in my heart. Late at night, I sat beside the fish mother, looking at her tied hands and feet and bulging belly, and I felt a sudden pain in my heart. She would be tortured like this even if she died. Suddenly, I heard a sound of footsteps. "Who is it?" A white shadow appeared in front of me. It was a man I had never seen before. He seemed to be wearing clothes that looked like Taoist robes. "What are you doing here?" He looked down at me with his arms folded. I didn't dare to tell him the secret of the village, so I responded with silence. "This ritual is quite cruel. It is simply to make the fish mother never reincarnate." I asked him, "Who are you?" "I saw a circle of black air covering the top of your village. I guessed that there might be something wrong, so I came to find out." I sighed and pointed at the woman. "It must be because of her. Why don't you give me this body?" I thought he was a bit weird and I was too lazy to deal with him. Suddenly, he seemed to be blinded by a light. He squatted down and snatched the pendant from my neck and asked, "Who gave you this thing?" I was so anxious that I quickly snatched it back. "What does it have to do with you?" "This thing is a very evil thing, it can suck your yang energy." I was a little angry and cursed, "Nonsense, there is a Buddha on it, how can it be evil? Didn't you find that the Buddha on it has no hands? The Buddha with a broken hand is poured into the blood of the dead, which is against the will of heaven." I took a closer look at the pendant with the light of the kerosene lamp in my hand, and found that there was a layer of light red blood inside it, and the Buddha on it really had no hands. But why did Granny Lu do this? She is so good to me on weekdays, there is no reason to scare me to death. Besides, yesterday, she told me not to trust anyone. Could this be a problem? I came here to save all of you villagers. This ritual can't break the curse of your village at all. I walked to the body of the fish mother, half believing and half doubting. took off all the bells on her body and threw them aside. Tell me, how do you want to save her? The next morning, the villagers went up the mountain. Granny Lou saw the bells thrown everywhere, and she was so scared that she almost couldn't stand still, and the body had disappeared long ago. The only one lying in the cave was me, who was knocked unconscious. When I opened my eyes, I was already lying in Granny Lou's house. She wiped the sweat off my face with a towel and asked, softly, Yun Yen, what's going on? I described the scene in the middle of the night with a horrified face. A Taoist priest attacked me and let the fish mother go. Granny Lou's expression was very angry, and she tightly grasped the towel in her hand. This is unreasonable. I will never let that Taoist priest go. Granny Lou, what should we do now? Will the people in the village? As soon as the voice fell, there was a scream outside. My brother rushed out of the house covered in blood. Save me, please save me quickly. He screamed in pain, but no one rushed to help him. He couldn't bear the pain and pulled out his hair and scales. The precious thing covered with fish scales also fell off. I walked up and carried him on my back and took him home. Brother, bear with it, I will call a doctor for you immediately. His face was already full of tears from the pain, and he held my hand tightly. Thank you, sister. You are still the best to me. What are you thanking me for? You are my dear brother. If I don't save you, who will save you? I curled my lips and walked into the kitchen, selected the sharpest knife and locked the door. When I came with the knife, my brother was so scared that he fell directly from the bed. You. What do you want to do? I touched the blade gently, smiling. Brother, don't you want to cure your illness? Shave off the fish scales and your illness will be cured. I grabbed his head and slammed it to the ground, then raised the knife and stabbed it into the flesh, like a fish on a chopping board. My brother kept begging me, but unfortunately he had no strength left. With a heart-wrenching scream, the fish scales were shaved off piece by piece. Don't worry, you won't die for the time being, and there will be a group of people to accompany you. After saying that, I pretended to be scared and ran out. Help. The fish mother is back, she killed my brother. When the villagers heard this, they were so scared that they ran back home and locked the door. After all, they were afraid that they would be the next one. In the evening, I hid in Granny Lou's room. I held her hand and begged, Granny Lou, please save me, I really don't want to die. Yun Yen, don't worry, I will protect you even if I risk my life. Looking at the old man's sincere eyes, I suddenly felt guilty and sad that I had doubted Granny Lou. In order to save the situation, I told Granny Lou the truth. Granny Lou, the Taoist priest said that the pendant you gave me was an evil thing. What's going on? The old man widened his eyes, his face full of disbelief. How is this possible? Yun Yen's broken hand Buddha is a family heirloom of my family from generation to generation. My heart's blood was added to it, so I can protect you from the curse of the fish mother. I suddenly realized that I was really deceived by the Taoist priest. I started to cry loudly. What's wrong, Yun Yen, why are you crying? I told the truth in detail. What should I do to save all this? Please don't abandon me because of this, you are the only one in the world who treats me well. Granny Lou was stunned, then looked at me with a wry smile and said, Silly child, how could I abandon you? Even if you do something wrong, you will always be my favorite child. I will definitely let you live well. As she said that, she took out a jade curved knife from the house. This thing was a treasure that my mother gave me before she died. She protected me all my life. With it, no demons or monsters can get close to me. If I insert it into the heart of the fish mother, it can cause her great loss of vitality. Taking this opportunity, I can completely lock her soul and let her be exiled to the 3 realms forever. My expression was a little worried. But how can we get close to her? Granny Lou smiled and looked at me. This requires your cooperation, Yun Yen. Everything can still be saved. Granny Lou wrote talismans all over my body with black ink, and then placed a circle of candles on the ground, and tied a circle of ropes tied with bells around my body. I was a little scared and asked cautiously, Granny Lou, is this really useful? Granny Lou answered while busying her hands, you help the fish mother untie the bell, and a trace of her soul is left on you. A soul-calling ceremony can bring her over. I lit the smoke in the house in advance, so she wouldn't notice my presence. When the fish mother gets close, don't hesitate and stab her in the heart with a knife. I nodded and understood. Granny Lou shook the bell in her hand like she did yesterday. One after another, a gust of wind blew, and the candle went out. The whole house fell into terrible darkness. It was the fish mother who came. The woman was wearing a red dress and walked towards me barefoot. Granny Lou walked quietly behind me while shaking the bell. Once the knife pierced into the fish mother's chest, she could take action immediately, but why did I do this? Yun Yen, now. I curled my lips and knocked over the smoke next to me. Soon, Granny Lou's figure was exposed under the eyes of the fish mother. The woman immediately pinched her neck fiercely and pressed against the wall. 4. Why? I pulled off the pendant on my neck and threw it at her feet. Stop pretending, Granny Lou. I actually knew it a long time ago. I was just playing along with you. If you hadn't handed me the scimitar, the fish mother really couldn't get into your body. You want to use my body to revive your granddaughter? No way. As soon as these words came out, the old woman who had just had a kind face changed her face instantly. You stinky girl, my Chimer died to save you. What's wrong with paying her back with your life? Then she looked at the fish mother in front of her and said, if it weren't for you who have been protecting her these years, I would have succeeded long ago. It's all because of you that my granddaughter can't be resurrected. Under the ferocious expression, it was all Granny Lou's terrible obsession. I sneered and slowly said, do you know that your granddaughter committed suicide? Granny Lou had an unbelievable expression on her face. It was your granddaughter who was almost bullied. I saw the son of the Zhao family tied her up the mountain, so I followed her quietly. I risked my life to save her and let her escape down the mountain. I thought she would help me, but when I knocked on your door again and again, all I got was your white eyes and evasive eyes. Granny Lou spit on the ground. You are talking nonsense. It is obviously the boy you took the initiative to hook up with. What does it have to do with my granddaughter? I sat on the ground and continued to tell my story carelessly. 1 month after that incident, I wanted to commit suicide, so I jumped into the river. I thought I was dead, but your granddaughter saved me. When I got ashore, I was thinking of pulling her up, but she shook my hand off without a struggle. The last words she said to me were, I'm sorry. Maybe it was guilt, or maybe she didn't want to live anymore. The last look in the girl's eyes was only a deep despair for the world. After hearing this, Granny Lou burst into tears, repeating, you lied to me, it's impossible, how could my granddaughter commit suicide, it must be you. After saying that, she inserted the hairpin on her head into the hand of the fish mother. Taking advantage of this opportunity, she immediately rushed towards me, and the next second a pair of hands pierced her heart, and fish scales instantly covered her whole body. No. Impossible, I haven't seen my granddaughter yet. Before she finished speaking, she fell down. Everything should be over, right? Yumu, just surrender and stop hurting people. The Taoist suddenly appeared in the house. Last night, he told me that Yumu was a demon who had cultivated into a human form. Even if her physical body was killed, she would soon be resurrected and grow a new body. She should be kind by nature, but she inexplicably went astray. After catching Yumu, he would take her back to the Taoist temple and have her purified by his masters. He could not accept the cruel spell that Granny Lou cast on Yumu, and would rather let me let her go. So he was a very kind person. Yumu stepped back, as if she had been betrayed, staring at me and the mirror in my hand. The Taoist said that if he met Yumu who had resurrected, he would drip blood from his fingertips on the mirror, and he would come over immediately. I will not kill you, but just take you back to the Taoist temple. These villagers are all innocent, and you should not harm them. Yumu wanted to take this opportunity to escape, but the Taoist immediately put talismans on all the doors of the room, and the woman could not escape anyway. He took out a string of beads and threw it hard at the fish mother. She couldn't resist and fell to the ground instantly. Stop struggling. This is not the place for you, he said, holding the golden bowl in his right hand, raising the sword in his left hand. and chanting a spell. I took this opportunity to move behind him step by step, pulled out the scimitar hidden in my sleeve, and stabbed it in. The Taoist priest didn't react and fell straight down. He was very angry and couldn't speak. I made a grimace. "I'm sorry, this thing has little effect on people, you will be injured at most. Don't think about catching the fish mother anymore. Even if I chase you to the ends of the earth, I will stop you." Once the Taoist priest was injured, the spells of the talisman on the door were all invalid. The fish mother looked at me with burning eyes. I nodded at her, and soon the woman ran away. "Why? Don't you want to save this village?" I couldn't help laughing out loud. "But didn't you say that my mother is kind by nature, and will repay kindness, and will never take the initiative to kill? What if the person she wants to repay is me?" I squatted down and patted the ashes on the Taoist priest's body. "Do you know what my wish was to her?" The Taoist priest finally reacted, stared at me with wide eyes, and asked, "Kill the whole village?" The man in front of me fainted before he could finish his words. I threw the mirror aside with an expressionless face and walked out of the door with a swagger. The fish mother kept her promise. The villagers were like crazy at this moment, scratching their scales vigorously. It seemed that someone told them that the disease would be cured if the scales fell off. What's more, they started to scrape the skin on their bodies with knives until they could see the bones. I walked to my father and squatted down. He was lying on the ground with blood all over his body, and he kept muttering, "Save me, save me." "But who will save you?" It started to rain, and the heart-wrenching screams gradually disappeared in the water. I looked up and found that the fish mother was looking at me from a distance. She stood in the rain and looked as beautiful as a little red fish. Suddenly, a memory flashed in my mind, and I smiled with relief. I waved to the little red fish, saying over and over again, "Thank you." When I packed all my luggage and planned where to go next, the Taoist priest came to my side with his back covered. I was a little embarrassed and asked softly, "Is the wound not serious?" The Taoist priest rolled his eyes at me. "What do you think? A hypocrite who talks about humanitarianism all the time." When I was about to go my separate ways with him, he grabbed my bag. "Are you interested in going up the mountain?" "What do you mean?" I said, "To our Taoist temple. You are less than 20 years old and you don't have much money. Where can you go? You don't want to drag me back and kill me? How is it possible? We will never kill, and you only need to sweep the fallen leaves at the door, and I can teach you some Taoist magic." "And what is your name?" "Jiang Yunyan. What about you?" "Qing Feng." "Okay, Taoist Qing Feng, look over there is a monster over there." Where? As he said that, he took out his sword. I quickly slipped away when he was not paying attention. It is better to rely on yourself than on others. How can I be sure that the Taoist temple will not be another nightmare? I can't afford to gamble, and I don't want to gamble. After leaving the village, I seemed to see the sun again. For the first time, I felt that the sun was so beautiful. I looked down and found that the little red fish in the river had been following me for a long time. No need to send it off. I will live well in the future. Extra. I am the descendant of the fish mother. When I was still a little red fish, I fell from the demon world because of playing secretly. When I opened my eyes, I was already in the human world. Maybe my color was too bright. I was caught by a group of children and tortured hard on the shore. I thought I was about to die. "Don't hurt her." Suddenly, a dirty girl shouted at them with a stick. Unfortunately, she seemed to have no strength, and the group of dead children knocked her to the ground in a few strokes. But even so, she did not run away. She rushed over to protect me tightly, and I was able to escape because of this. Since then, I often come to this village to see her. I didn't know that someone could live so miserably. But with my current ability, I can't save her at all. So I practiced desperately, trying to transform into a human form. The first revenge was on the man who raped her. At that time, my demon power had been cultivated to be strong enough, and I could immediately transform into a human form. Humans are so fragile. I just cast a spell and let the man die tragically on the spot. Later, I was finally able to transform into a human form, but there was a mistake in the process and I couldn't grow hands and feet. But it didn't matter. Soon I was able to grow a body again. I finally talked to the benefactor I had always missed. I also witnessed how terrible this village was. She told me her wish, so I would not hesitate to use up all my magic power for her. I succeeded, I saved her. I know that she can finally live the life she wants. I also know that we will never meet again. The end.
When I started driving a bus, the old master who introduced me to the industry said that when driving the last bus, you must remember 4 rules. 1. Do not stop at platform 20. 2. When you encounter an unfamiliar fork in the road, never turn right. 3. When you find someone wearing red shoes on the bus, no matter what the other party says, don't believe it. 4. If you find that the number of people on the bus does not match your memory, remember that no matter what happens, you must not stop the bus before it reaches the terminal. I yawned. Last night, Wang Dai and Li Ming, the 2 guys, asked me to play cards. I had a good luck for the first time in a long time. I couldn't help but play a few more games, and I accidentally stayed up all night. After staying up all night and driving all day, I was so sleepy that I yawned. Fortunately, this was the last bus, and I could go home and sleep after this trip. I glanced at the car through the rearview mirror. Since it was the last bus, there were few people in the car. An old lady who looked to be in her 60s, wearing a flowered headscarf. A middle school boy was sitting by the window with headphones on, and there was a big school bag next to him. How can there be students going home at this time? Did they just finish cram school? Kids nowadays are really hard-working. There was also a man in his 30s who looked very strong and was watching a video on his phone. The car was driving smoothly. The normal route of the bus I was driving was from the city center hospital to the suburban funeral home. Several of us driver buddies had joked privately that this was called a one-stop service from birth to death. However, the company has an unwritten rule. That is, when the last bus is running, we only drive to the second to last stop, the suburban Happy Garden, and will not drive to the funeral home. I heard that there is such a rule because when the company was just opened, drivers often found ghost money in the cash box. The boss is a superstitious person, and he immediately invited a master to perform a ritual. The master said that this situation occurred because when we drove the last bus, it was midnight, when the yin energy was the strongest in the day, and when the ghost gate was wide open, many ghosts from the funeral home ran out to take the bus. It is very simple to avoid receiving ghost money. As long as the last bus does not go to the funeral home, it only goes to the previous stop. After that, there was an unwritten rule in our company. There weren't many people who had to go to the funeral home in the middle of the night. At least I haven't seen any in the past 6 months of driving. To be honest, I don't really believe in these superstitious things. But I'm still happy to drive less and be a little lazy. Dear passengers, we have arrived at Renmin Shinkun Station. Please get off from the back door, the female voice of the robot in the loudspeaker announced coldly. The 3 passengers in the car showed no signs of moving, and I was about to close the door. Suddenly, a woman in high heels and a long skirt rushed onto the bus and ran directly to my side. "Master, please go to station 20, the woman said in a crying voice. Her voice was not loud, but it was like a thunderclap, which directly broke all the sleepiness in my brain, because there is no station 20 on the route of this bus. When I first entered the industry half a year ago, the old master who was in charge of taking me once told me that there are 4 things to pay attention to when driving a night bus. The first one is that you cannot stop at station 20. I was very confused at the time, because there was no 20 station on the company's route map. The old master said that I was new to the industry and didn't know that there was originally a no. 20 station between Renmin New Village Station and Pingan South Road Station. However, for some reason, as soon as the bus stopped there, the driver on the bus could always hear a series of knocks on the window, as if something wanted to get up, but when the driver looked out, there was nothing outside the window. Some drivers with weak constitutions often suddenly develop a high fever shortly after hearing the knocks on the window. Many drivers privately spread that this little ghost wanted to hitchhike. One driver had a low fever that day. When he stopped at No. 20 station, he heard a series of rapid knocks on the window. He had just taken medicine and was a little confused at the time, so he didn't pay much attention. Dong tilde dong tilde dong tilde dong tilde. The bus had already driven a distance, but the knocks on the window had never stopped. Dong dong, dong dong, da 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 da. The knocks on the window seemed to have changed. The driver thought vaguely that the sound was originally a little muffled through the car window, but it suddenly became clear at some point, as if he was in the car. The driver suddenly broke out in a cold sweat. He suddenly remembered that when he left the car again from station 20, he seemed to have forgotten to close the door. The door was wide open all the way. The sound came in from outside the car. Why didn't anyone remind me when there were so many passengers in the car? The driver was scared and felt something was wrong. No, there were so many people. Why was it so quiet in the car? There was nothing except the clattering sound that was getting closer and closer. The driver didn't dare to look back, because he found that the clattering sound was getting closer and closer to him, even right next to his ear. Suddenly, the clattering sound stopped, and there was a dead silence in the car. The old master said that it was the first major car accident since the establishment of our company, and no one survived in the entire car. Since then, Platform 20 has been abandoned. Residents living nearby can only take the bus to Renmin Shinkun Station or Ping'an South Road Station, and then walk back by themselves. And now this woman with long hair and long skirt rushed to my side and said to me in a crying voice, "Master, please, I want to go to Station 20. Just when I was about to refuse this woman, another young man came up from the back door of the car. He was tall and thin, and his face looked a little tired. When the woman saw the man coming up, she immediately showed a very frightened expression on her face. Xiaohua, don't make trouble. Even if you are angry with me, you shouldn't run out alone in the middle of the night. It's dangerous for a girl like you to be outside in the middle of the night." Hearing this, the man should be the woman's boyfriend or husband. Although his face was full of fatigue, he still coaxed the woman in a very gentle voice. I said, "I'm not Xiaohua." The woman's shrill voice broke out in the car. "I don't know you at all." When she shouted, the other people in the car looked over. The middle school student took off his headphones and picked up his phone, looking like he wanted to take a photo. The sturdy man looked at this side with a suspicious look, and the muscles under his clothes were faintly visible. The young man was a little nervous now, and smiled to the people around him. "My girlfriend and I are arguing. Sorry to bother you." I said, "I'm not your girlfriend." The woman shouted excitedly, and her voice increased by several decibels. "This person has been following me from the beginning, and I don't know him at all." I immediately thought of the common trafficking routines in the news. At this time, I didn't care about driving. I put down the steering wheel and looked at the two people confronting behind me. The sturdy man also stood up and walked towards this side. Obviously, he was going to help when he saw injustice. I knew you would say that. The young man sighed, but he didn't look flustered because his lie was exposed. Instead, he took out an ID card from his pocket. "When you left home, your ID card fell out of your bag." I picked it up casually. The man held up his ID card as a show. I looked at the head portrait on the ID card, and it was indeed the woman in front of me, whose full name was Lianhua. My fears were somewhat dispelled, and the sturdy man also stopped. It seemed that this was indeed a quarrel between a young couple, and the woman deliberately wanted to embarrass the man. However, the woman named Lianhua covered her bag and continued to complain. "Lie. This ID card shows that you pretended to bump into me just now in the mall and took it from my bag." After the woman finished speaking, she suddenly grabbed my arm and said, "Driver, please believe me, I really don't know him. I was just shopping in the mall, and this man suddenly bumped into me, and then followed me all the way. Please drive the car to Station 20, my home is nearby. I know you usually drive directly to Xingfu South Road Station. I used to walk 15 minutes from there to go home. I don't want to cause you any trouble, but I can only ask you to save me." The woman choked and cried. "I saw a knife in the man's trouser pocket before I got on the bus just now. He will definitely not let me go after getting off the bus. Please save me." The fear in the woman's expression did not seem to be fake, but I was distracted at this time. This woman was so strong that my arm was pulled out with red marks, and my hand was so cold. It was summer now. Was it because of fear that my hand was sweating? When the strong man heard this, he rushed over and grabbed the young man's arm. I realized that the young man had kept his left hand in his pocket since he got on the bus. The strong man pulled the hand out with one hand, and really took out a fruit knife from the young man's pants. The strong man snorted. "What else do you have to say?" The young man's face showed an embarrassed expression for a moment and explained, "I was just worried about the insecurity at night, so I took a knife out." The strong man was too lazy to listen to his quibbling, turned to me and said, "Master, please take a detour. Let's go to the police station first. I despise men who attack women the most in my life." Things took a turn, and the woman thanked the strong man again and again. Alas, the young man still did not panic, but showed a bit of sadness. I didn't want to say it, but my girlfriend has serious paranoia, and sometimes she has a serious tendency to attack when she is sick, so I carry a knife when I go out. "Think about it carefully. Is there a shopping mall nearby?" the man said. I suddenly realized that the nearest shopping mall to this bus stop is 5 kilometers away. How could the woman in front of me run so far when she was wearing high heels? The strong man was also confused at this time. I could see that he was just like me and didn't know who to believe. "Xiaohua, I am really your boyfriend. It's just that you will forget me when you get sick." The man looked at the woman with sad eyes. "If you don't believe it, then I ask you, what are your parents' names? Who is your best friend? What school did you go to in middle school?" Facing the man's series of questions, Xiaohua showed a confused expression. I don't remember." "How could I not remember anything? Who am I? And how could I be here?" The woman hugged her head and squatted down in pain. Looking at this amnesia drama in front of us, the strong man and I looked at each other and saw a bitter smile on each other's face. Unexpectedly, we really met a mental patient today. "Brother, I'm sorry, I just misunderstood you." The strong man scratched his head awkwardly. "It's okay, I'm used to it." The young man just smiled tiredly. "Master, we both get off at Pingan South Road Station." The young man said hello to me. After that, he gently helped the woman squatting on the ground up, and the two walked to the back of the car and sat down together. Finally, I could continue driving, and I breathed a sigh of relief. I put my hands back on the steering wheel, and at this moment, through the rearview mirror of the car, I saw a foreign object from the corner of my eye, a touch of red. The man's shoes were red. When you find someone wearing red shoes on the car, don't believe what the other person says, the old master said. "What kind of etiquette is this?" I refilled him with a glass of white wine. "Oh, I can't explain it clearly." The old master waved his hand. "You young people love to ask questions about everything. Why do you ask so clearly? Will I, an old man, lie to you? These are the old rules passed down in our industry. You just follow them. Isn't it because you are knowledgeable and I, a junior, want to learn more?" I picked out nice words to say. Sure enough, the old master was a little happy to hear that. "Since you young man want to know so much, I will tell you a few more words. This happened several years ago. When a driver was driving, a man wearing red shoes got on. The driver didn't think much at the time, but just muttered that the man's shoes were flashy and looked like a woman. As a result, a few days later, the driver saw the man wearing red shoes on the news. It turned out that the man was a murderer who specialized in torturing and killing young women. He liked to use a fruit knife to cut women's throats and bleed them. The red shoes, he saw that they were actually the shoes that the pervert had just killed someone and were stained red with blood. It is said that when the murderer left that day, the woman was not dead yet. If the driver could find that the pervert's shoes were stained with blood and called the police in time, the woman might have been saved. Although the perverted murderer had been arrested, the driver was still scared and asked for several days off. Later, when the driver went to work, he found a row of red footprints on his car. No matter how hard he scrubbed, he couldn't get it clean. He applied to the company for a replacement car, but the weird thing was that no matter how many cars he changed, a row of red footprints would suddenly appear on the new car after a while. Not long after, the driver was found and hanged himself at home. I heard that some time before his death, he was crazy and shouted to everyone he saw, "Don't believe what the person wearing red shoes said. Don't do anything he asked you to do." Oh, by the way, the murderer got on the bus at Renmin New Village Station and got off at Xingfu South Road. The old master added, "There are many cheap apartments nearby, and many single girls live by themselves, so they like to rent there. I looked at the reflection of the red shoes in the rearview mirror, and my hands were already full of cold sweat. Station 20, Xingfu South Road Station. Where should I stop? The car was still moving slowly, but I was no longer sleepy at this time. The distance between each station was about 5 minutes by car. In 5 minutes, it's Station 20, and in 10 minutes, it's Xingfu South Road Station. Which station should I stop at? The carriage behind me was very quiet, and everyone was quietly waiting for the car to stop. I told myself that these were all futile superstitions, and that the old master made up a story to scare me. That's right, there are no ghosts in the world, and these are definitely fake. But thinking carefully, what the man said is indeed a bit problematic. Is there any necessary connection between the woman's paranoid delusion and him carrying a knife? He said that the woman ran out in anger after quarreling with him, but the woman's makeup on her face was very delicate, and she was wearing a long skirt and high heels. It didn't seem like she ran out on impulse, but more like she was dressed up and went out shopping. Even if the woman really had paranoid delusion, it didn't mean that the man's words were credible. Maybe the man deliberately found out about the woman in advance, and then decided to pretend to be her boyfriend. Thinking of this, I made a decision. Just get off at Station 20. Anyway, the driver mentioned by the old master forgot to close the door, so the clattering sound came in. As soon as that woman leaves, I'll close the door, and nothing should happen. I stopped the car 5 minutes later. Since Platform 20 was not in the planned route, there was no mechanical girl broadcasting on the loudspeaker. As soon as the car stopped, I shouted loudly, "Girl, you are here." The woman seemed to have taken a nap just now. After hearing my voice, she got up and walked down in a daze. I stared at her figure and almost closed the door the moment she got off the car. I started the car again. During the whole process, I kept looking at the young man with the corner of my eyes. At the moment the woman got off the car, a trace of resentment flashed in his eyes, but the man did not make any other movements, nor did he follow the woman down. Instead, he quickly adjusted his expression and acted as if nothing had happened. The middle school student was still immersed in the music in the headphones, and the strong man was fascinated by the video and did not notice this scene. I should have made the right decision, I thought so. ... Just when I breathed a sigh of relief, a crisp knocking sound rang out, and I was almost scared to death. How could the knocking sound in the story of the old master be here? I had clearly closed the door. I turned my head in despair, but saw a scene that I could not believe. The old lady wrapped in flowered cloth. I don't know when she took out a wooden fish and started to knock it regularly. Crazy, I was almost laughing out of anger. The old lady was knocking the wooden fish while muttering something, as if she was chanting a sutra. The other passengers looked at her with strange eyes, but the old lady was calm and didn't pay any attention to the gazes of others. It was not easy for them to argue with an old lady, so they all retracted their gazes and played with their mobile phones silently. I thought to myself, what's wrong with me? Someone is knocking a wooden fish in the car. I smiled bitterly and continued to drive. Oh, this train is really long. I relaxed, and sleepiness swept over me again. I started yawning again. It was late at night and there were not many cars on the road. I decided to drive faster. However, a few minutes later, I felt something was wrong again. Is Xingfu South Road Station that far away? The distance between each station is 5 minutes. I drove faster this time. It should have taken 3 or 4 minutes to arrive. However, I looked at the time on my watch. 6 minutes had passed. Why did the scenery outside seem to have not changed? Did I see this tree just now? Why did I feel like I had just walked this section of road? No, calm down, I need to calm down. This place is originally quite desolate, with no landmark buildings. It is not clear in the middle of the night. I must have seen it wrong. Yes, it must be like this. These trees look similar. I must have mixed up to similar trees. I bit the tip of my tongue and forced myself to calm down. This time I slowed down a lot and stared at the scenery outside the car window. A few minutes later, the tree appeared in front of me again. There was a circle of white paint on the trunk, and a branch on the right side hung down. Yes, it was still the same tree. I drove back to the original place again. Cold sweat instantly covered my back. The people in the car seemed to feel something was wrong. The sturdy man put down his phone, looked out the window suspiciously and asked, "Master, Why do I feel that the bus is a little slow today? Did you take a detour? The old lady also stopped knocking the wooden fish. I wiped my sweat. There is no point in hiding it from them at this time, so it is better to tell them the situation and brainstorm together to find a solution. Brother, to be honest, I have to say that today is really weird. In the past, it took me less than 5 minutes to walk this road, but today I don't know why the bus has been spinning in the same place. While I was talking, the familiar tree appeared again. I smiled bitterly and said, "Look, that tree, our bus has passed by it for the 3rd time." The sturdy man looked at the dark blue under my eyes and obviously didn't believe it. "Master, could it be that you were driving tired and didn't see the road clearly, so you have been spinning around here? Since you don't believe it, you can sit in the front seat and see for yourself if there is something wrong with my driving." The sturdy man sat down next to me and turned on the navigation software on his phone. As soon as the car deviated from the route, the software would immediately show a prompt. The car continued to drive, and a few minutes later the tree appeared for the 4th time. This time the sturdy man was also stunned. "This is really weird. I just saw with my own eyes that our car didn't even turn a corner. How did it return to the original road?" The man's face was full of disbelief. And the mobile navigation also showed that we were moving forward. Logically, we should have arrived at the station long ago. You young people don't understand. This is called ghost wall, also called ghost covering the eyes, the old lady behind suddenly said leisurely. While speaking, she continued to knock her wooden fish. At this time, the sound of the wooden fish echoed in the airy carriage, and there was an indescribable weirdness. Who said I don't understand? The sturdy man obviously didn't like the old lady's attitude of taking advantage of her age, and interrupted her rudely. There are many such plots in movies. Isn't it just that there is a little ghost that makes people unable to get out? The old lady didn't care about the man's rude tone and continued, "There is a little ghost in this car now, covering your eyes. If you can't find the real road in time, you will all die here." The old lady's words made me feel uncomfortable. What do you mean you will all die here? She herself seems to be out of the matter and calm. Does she have any way to break the ghost covering her eyes? I thought about it. I know that some elderly people like others to flatter and coax them to satisfy their vanity. The old master who brought me into the industry is like this. He always says half of the words and hides the other half. He has to force me to praise him a few words before he is willing to speak. I have been dealing with such people for a long time. I said modestly that we don't understand these things in our younger lives. "You old man looks knowledgeable. Can you tell us about it?" Sure enough, a satisfied smile appeared on the old lady's face, and she waved her hand and said, "This is what I heard from the villagers when I was a child." Ghost covering the eyes actually means that a little ghost climbs on a person's body, covers the person's eyes, and then creates an illusion. The person whose eyes are covered by the ghost thinks that he is walking on the right path, but in fact he has been deceived by the little ghost and has been going around in circles for a long time. If he cannot find it in time, he will be trapped to death. Oh, if you say this, it's not just the two of us. This ghost even covered the eyes of my mobile phone navigation. The strong man obviously didn't believe it and argued. The old lady didn't care about him and continued, "There are ways to break the ghost wall. The first one is to apply things that can ward off evil spirits, such as cow's tears, black wolfberry, and cinnabar on the eyes. The little ghost is most afraid of these things and will naturally let go. The second method is to prepare a bowl of white rice, mix it with burnt incense ash, stick a chopstick vertically on the ground, and the little ghost will eat it after a while. While the little ghost is eating, run away quickly. You must leave before he finishes eating, otherwise this trick will fail when he is full." What you said is the same as not saying anything. The strong man sarcastically said, "How can we become black dog blood now? White rice, what are you in a hurry?" The old lady glared at him dissatisfiedly. "I haven't finished talking yet. The last method can also be used without props. In the past, there was a saying in our countryside that when you walk alone at night, if your shoelaces are loose, when you squat down to tie your shoelaces, you must remember not to look back through your hips, otherwise you will see the ghost's feet. The yang energy in a person, that is, the 3 fires, are all above the shoulders. When the body is turned over and you look back through the hips, the yang fire is turned over and becomes yin fire, and people can see things in the underworld. When you encounter a ghost wall, You can look back through your hips and see the world in the eyes of the little ghost, that is, the correct road hidden by him. The old lady said that this is the principle of negative equals positive. I muttered softly, "What should I do?" The strong man was a little confused and looked at me and asked, "Master, can you drive upside down?" I rolled my eyes. "Brother, I have an idea." I said that it is definitely impossible to drive upside down. In this way, I will drive normally, and you will follow the old lady's instructions and look at the scenery outside from the hips. Once you find that I start to go around in circles, remind me immediately. That is to let the strong man be my human navigation. The strong man thought about it and thought that this method was reliable, so he did it immediately. I didn't dare to relax at all. The car drove very steadily and very slowly, for fear of any forks. Sure enough, less than a minute after using it, the strong man suddenly shouted, "Turn the steering wheel to the left." Damn it, you really just started to go around in circles to the right. It seems that what the old lady said was right. There was really a ghost confusing me and confusing my sense of direction. I always thought that I was moving straight ahead, but in fact, I was confused and went around in circles to the right without realizing it. With the strong man as a human navigation, the next thing was much easier. Several times, I went around in circles unconsciously without realizing it. The strong man could find it immediately and direct me to turn back. About 10 minutes later, I realized that the tree painted white finally did not appear in my sight again. Instead, there were several rows of street lights. I have never felt that the light of street lights can be so warm and so reassuring. The strong man and I looked at each other, and both of us almost cried with joy. I finally walked out, the strong man said excitedly, because he had to keep leaning over and looking back. His whole face was flushed and red, and I also breathed a sigh of relief as if I had survived a disaster. If I hadn't been driving, I would have collapsed on the seat, but I knew it was not the time to relax completely. Everything that happened tonight was really weird. There was a woman going to Station 20, there was a man wearing red shoes, and now there was a ghost wall. All the weird things happened at the same time. Just now when I heard the old lady talk about the 3 fires in a person, I was thinking secretly, I have also heard of the 3 fires. When the yang energy in a person is strong, the fire burns vigorously and those evil things dare not approach. On the contrary, if the fire in a person is small, it will attract all kinds of evil spirits. The time of the last bus is the midnight, when the yin energy is the strongest in a day. The company has always let young people like me who are upright, young and strong to be drivers. The purpose is to suppress the yin energy with the yang fire on the body. But recently, I have been dragged by Wang Dai and Li Ming to drink and gamble every day, and I haven't had a good rest for many days. My body is inevitably a little weak. Is it because of this that the fire on my shoulder has become smaller, which has attracted so many dirty things? I secretly swore in my heart that as long as I can finish this trip safely, I will immediately quit all bad habits and become a 5 good youth. Speaking of which, the 4 taboos that the old master told me at that time. 1 is platform 20, 1 is red shoes, and what are the other 2? I racked my brains to think about it. At that time, I just regarded those words as bragging at the wine table and didn't take them to heart. Now I just want to slap myself at that time. But I soon remembered, because this road that should have been straight to the end actually had a fork in the road. After experiencing those things just now, my heart has become extremely strong. It's just a fork in the road, which can't scare me at all. I remembered what the old master said at that time. What is the other taboo? When you encounter a fork in the road, you must choose the left one. I am a person who likes to get to the bottom of things. But that time, I didn't ask him why he chose left instead of right. Although I always call that person the old master, he is actually only in his 30s, not much older than me, but he looks like a man in his 60s or 70s. I heard that he was driving a car and somehow took the wrong road. When he came to a fork in the road, the young and energetic driver thought he could just pick one and go back. No one knew what happened after that, but when people rescued him, they found that he had aged by dozens of years overnight. He was still trembling and said some incomprehensible words. In that accident, he also lost both eyes, and there was only a black hole in his eye socket. After that, the company not only did not dismiss him, but arranged a more leisurely job for him, and even the salary was much higher than when he was driving. Many people say that the boss is really affectionate, but I know that is not the case. I don't know what he can see in his black eye sockets. I only know that he knows all the strange things that happened in the company. Obviously he didn't get on that car, and there were no survivors in that car, but he could still tell the strange things that happened in that car. Isn't it amazing? And the old master once told me very seriously that when you encounter a fork in the road, you must not turn right. I chose the road on the left without any hesitation. However, just when I was about to drive over, the old lady seemed to be stimulated by something, and she grabbed my wrist tightly and said, "Young man, you can't drive left, you must not drive left." The old lady, who was calm even when she encountered a ghost wall, grabbed me with extreme fear at this time. Her face was pale, her forehead was sweating a lot, and her eyeballs were almost falling out, staring at me fiercely. "Why can't you drive left?" I stopped the car. When we were in the ghost wall just now, thanks to this old lady, we were able to get out smoothly. Maybe she knows something else that we don't understand. The old lady shook her head and said, "I can't say, I really can't say. But you believe what I say, an old woman, if you drive to the road on the left, then all of us in the car will die." Her last shout was so sharp that the strong man and I couldn't help shuddering. In short, listen to my advice, you really can't turn left. I am in this car myself, will I lie to you? The old lady's tone was a little flustered. I could feel that she was deeply afraid of the road on the left. What should I do? Should I trust her and choose the right side, or trust the old master and choose the left side? I was in a dilemma again. The old master's words came true twice, and the old lady's words also saved me once. Logically speaking, the old master should be more reliable in 2-to-1, but if we look at the old master's situation, the worst case of entering the road on the right is to lose a pair of eyes. And this old lady said that the road on the left is sure to die. A pair of eyes and a life, which one to choose? I made a decision. The car started again and drove towards the right intersection. Through the rearview mirror of the car, I saw the old lady breathe a sigh of relief. As the car got closer and closer to the right intersection, the old lady had a subtle weird smile on her lips. At this moment, I suddenly changed direction and the car rushed directly to the left. The smile on the old lady's lips froze instantly, and the next second she rushed over like crazy, with an extremely hideous face. "Stop her, otherwise we will all die," I yelled at the strong man next to me. Although the strong man didn't understand what happened, he saw the old lady's extremely evil and terrifying face and understood one thing, that she must not be allowed to get close to me, otherwise the car would be destroyed and people would die. The car drove into the road on the left, and what came into view was a cemetery. Countless tombstones stood in the dark night, and the green ghost lights stared at me coldly like a pair of ghost eyes. The tombstones seemed to come alive and move towards the direction of the car, as if trying to block my way. Although I was in the carriage, I felt the chill that penetrated my bones. The old lady behind me laughed strangely in a voice that was not human. "Hey, if you enter the mass grave, all of you will die, everyone will die." The old master only told me that I could not choose the road on the right, but he did not say that the road on the left would definitely be safe. Am I really going to die here today? Fear made me tremble uncontrollably. However, after the extreme fear, another kind of emotion broke out. What kind of shitty ghosts are you, picking on the weak, right? Who did I provoke? And you all come to harm me. Since you want me to die, I won't be polite to you. Even if I really die, I will peel off a layer of your skin before I die. I stepped on the accelerator to the maximum. At this time, I had no scruples. If there are ghosts who dare to come, just come, and see if I won't smash you to pieces. I thought viciously, and my rage had burned away my rationality. I didn't even consider whether the car could really cause harm to the ghost without a physical body. I just rushed recklessly, wondering if it was really like what people often say, ghosts are afraid of evil people. After I went crazy without caring about anything, the tombstones on the roadside became fewer and fewer. I saw a glimmer of hope again, and I didn't dare to let go of the accelerator at all, praying that I could leave this place smoothly. Walking to the back, there were fewer and fewer tombstones, and finally only a huge grave was left blocking the front of the car. There was a posthumous photo on the tombstone in front of the grave. With the help of the car lights, I saw that the posthumous photo was an old lady wrapped in floral cloth. She looked exactly like the old lady behind me. At this time, The old lady's eyes had no white at all, and turned completely black. Her nails were very long, and there was mud in the gaps between her nails. A strong stench of corpse filled the entire car. Even if the strong man's brain was not working well, he realized what he had just blocked. His legs softened and he collapsed to the ground, and the old lady rushed towards me like crazy. The initial anger had dissipated, and fear surged into my heart again. But I still gritted my teeth and forced myself not to escape from the seat, and my foot never left the accelerator. The old lady's dry and rotten hands grabbed my neck directly, and I had no doubt that she could break my neck directly. At this critical second, the car hit the tombstone fiercely. Without the huge impact I imagined, the car seemed to just smash a bubble. I looked at the 2 rows of street lights outside the car, which gave out reassuring lights competently. Those tombstones had disappeared at some point, and the old lady in the car was no longer in sight. I returned to the right road again, and this time I was really limp. But I knew I couldn't stop this car yet, and I had to keep driving. So far, the old master's words have saved me 3 times. I have completely believed that if I want to survive, I must follow his instructions. He talked about 4 points in total. What was the last point? I thought desperately. Oh, I remembered. If you find that the number of people on the bus does not match your memory, remember that you must not stop the bus before it reaches the terminal, no matter what happens. I turned around carefully, trying to confirm whether there were any faces I didn't recognize on the bus. The sturdy man was still in shock after what happened just now, and he was sitting behind me, panting. Fortunately, there were only 2 of us on the bus, and no strange new faces suddenly appeared. To be honest, before turning around to look, I had already prepared for the worst. For example, the seats in the back were all crowded with people staring at me. It seemed that God finally showed kindness and didn't summon new ghosts to scare me. I felt a little relieved and prepared to continue driving. Hey, there were 5 or 6 people on the bus at the beginning. Who would have thought that only the strong man and I were left in the end? Something seems to be wrong. The crazy woman got off at platform 20. I just bumped into the grave of the ghost old lady. Where is the middle school student wearing headphones and the man with red shoes? Cold sweat covered my back again. That's right, there are not many people on this bus, but 2 people are missing. When did those 2 people disappear? Why don't I have any impression at all? Thinking about it, when the ghost old lady was angry just now, there was only the strong man in the car, and the seats in the back row were as quiet as death. Did they disappear at that time? The doors and windows of the car were closed tightly, so they couldn't jump out of the car and leave. Are they all ghosts too? The car was getting colder and colder, and I felt like I was in a sealed ice storage. The old master said that when the number of people does not match, no matter what happens, you cannot stop before reaching the terminal. As long as I don't stop, I will drive directly to the funeral home, and it should be fine, right? I gritted my teeth and continued to drive, but at the same time I remembered what the ghost old lady said. Looking back from the crotch, I can see evil things. I want to know whether there are really only me and the strong man in this car, or whether it is actually full of invisible people. After confirming that there are no roadblocks in the road ahead, I kept my hands on the steering wheel, moved half of my buttocks out of the seat, took a deep breath, pressed my head down, looked back through my crotch, and retracted my head immediately after a second. During this process, I kept paying attention to keep the bus moving forward. Fortunately, the back of the car was empty. I didn't see a pair of feet, not a pair of feet. I was stunned for a moment. My hands were shaking. My clothes were completely wet with cold sweat, and I didn't dare to look back. I don't know if I can leave this car alive. I vaguely remembered that this bus was about to arrive at the funeral home, but the strong man had not said that he wanted to get off. When did he get on the bus? Why didn't he say where his destination was when he got on the bus? I only know that there was no pair of feet in the car behind me. At 1:05 a.m. last night, a bus accident occurred in the suburbs of my city. No passengers were found in the car, and only one driver died on the spot. The cause of the accident is still under investigation, so please continue to pay attention. In a small restaurant on the side of the road, the boss was bored watching the TV news. Business is not very good today. Only an old man and a young man are drinking and eating skewers. The old man is blind, dirty and torn, and he is bragging with the young man with big yellow teeth. I tell you, You are new to our business and don't understand it. When driving at night, it is easiest to encounter ghosts. The old man drank a glass of beer and began to point out the situation. Especially this last bus, the evil spirit is the heaviest, and it is possible to encounter ghosts in succession. The younger man obviously didn't believe it and smiled with some disdain. But drinking without some bragging as a snack is obviously a bit boring, so he pretended to be curious and asked the old man to tell him. There are 5 things to pay attention to when driving a night bus. The old man burped as he spoke. 1. Don't stop at platform 20. 2. When you encounter an unfamiliar fork in the road, never turn right. 3. When you find someone wearing red shoes on the bus, no matter what the other party says, don't believe it. 4. If you find that the number of people on the bus doesn't match your memory, then remember that you must not stop the bus no matter what happens before the bus reaches the terminal. There is one last thing. 5. If you find that a passenger has not reported his destination since he got on the bus, you must find a way to get him off the bus and never take him to the terminal. The old man said that this kind of ghost is specifically looking for a substitute. If you carry him all the way, it is equivalent to walking the road to the underworld for him. When the road is finished, your life will be taken away by him. The old man told a series of stories, and the young man was obviously a little bluffed. After thinking for a while, he said, "Master, your statement is a bit contradictory. Your 4th point says that if you find that the number of people is not right, you should drive to the terminal immediately, and the 5th point says that you must not drive to the terminal. Then I ask you, what should you do if the number of people does not match and there is a substitute ghost in the car?" The young man felt that he had caught this bragging loophole and asked with some pride. "Heh." The old man grinned. "If you really encounter such a thing, then I can only say that there is only one answer, a dead end." September 2021. A user with the ID Hong Hong Lu posted a post on a website telling about some bizarre things that happened on campus when he was studying at a certain university. Here we call the poster Z Hong. The post not only contains his own personal experience, but also some collective experiences of alumni who studied at this school at that time. Coordinates: Jinzhou City, Liaoning Province. I won't mention the name of my alma mater. I guess friends who have studied at this school can guess it by looking at the description of the post. After the post was posted, it quickly caused heated discussions. Many netizens pointed out that this is Baha'i University. Some netizens even directly stated that they were also students of this university and had the same experience as Zihong. Welcome to listen to today's story. Back in 2014, Zihong had just completed the admission procedures and was assigned a dormitory building. On the way to the dormitory building, I heard a lot of rumors about this school from the seniors. For example, the dormitory where Zihong was assigned was previously occupied by girls. As for why the school asked men and women to exchange dormitories, all students were not clear about this. I only know that a few days before the freshmen were to enter the school suddenly forced all boys and girls to exchange dormitories, and it had to be completed before the freshmen entered the school. When I heard the senior say this, I didn't take it too seriously at first, but after living in this dormitory for a while, I found that this dormitory building did seem to be a little bit wrong. Let's not talk about the inconvenience of boys and girls changing dormitories to go to the toilet. Among the many dormitory buildings in the school, only Xiaohong's building would have power outages at 10 o'clock every night, while other dormitory buildings in the school would not have power outages until 11 o'clock. Moreover, the entire first floor of Xiaohong's dormitory, except for the room of the dormitory manager, all other rooms were empty. No matter how tight the dormitory was at that time, the more than 60 rooms on this floor had never been occupied. In addition, as soon as the lights went out every night, the building manager would immediately lock the door, and no matter what you said, he would not open the door. The door of the dormitory building would not be reopened until 4 o'clock in the morning. Not long after, a terrible thing happened. It was the second half of the first semester of the first year of college. On the first day of school, Xiaohong and a roommate in the dormitory jumped over the wall to the internet cafe outside to play games all night as usual. But I don't know what happened that day. When Zihong played until 4 a.m., he felt dizzy and just wanted to sleep. Seeing that Zihong's face was a little yellow, his roommate thought that he was tired from staying up all night in recent days, so he got off the plane early. The two of them had some breakfast on the street and started walking along the school fence to the west gate. But just as they passed their dormitory building, Zihong suddenly heard a woman singing from their dormitory building. Because their dormitory is very close to the school fence, about 2 meters away, and Zihong and his roommate walked close to the fence outside the school, they could clearly tell that the source of the sound was their dormitory building, and it was the first floor where no one lived. What's more terrifying is that the singing from the dormitory building is the same tune as the one hummed by Zihong's roommate. In an instant, Zihong felt that all the hairs on his body stood up, and at this time his roommate was still humming to himself. It was not until Zihong patted his roommate that he reacted. In panic, the two ran back to the internet cafe. Sitting on the chair in the internet cafe, Zihong began to comfort his roommates. Someone must have sneaked to the first floor to go to the toilet to listen to music. Let's not scare ourselves. But Zihong himself didn't believe this. Because the dormitory building used to be a female dormitory, there were many toilets. Moreover, who would go to the first floor to go to the toilet in the early morning when they had nothing to do? It was just an excuse. The two waited until the sky was completely bright, and then they returned to the dormitory from the internet cafe. But fortunately, nothing happened afterwards. Zihong almost forgot about it slowly. Until one time at a class reunion, the host mentioned this again, and a senior sister's face darkened immediately after hearing it. Zihong thought that the senior sister was scared and dared not listen, and was thinking about laughing at the other party. But the senior sister's words immediately made Zihong shut up instantly. The senior student said that what Zihong just described was what happened to her when she was a freshman. One of her senior students at that time also encountered the same situation as Zihong described. In fact, Zihong and her roommates experienced many strange things in this dormitory building throughout the freshman semester. Strange laptop. Zihong said that this dormitory is an old building. Usually, the power consumption is large and the voltage is unstable. Although they were mentally prepared when they lived there, they were still scared sometimes. For example, the laptop computer in the dormitory that was turned off would automatically turn on at some time in the middle of the night after the dormitory was powered off. The sudden sound of the optical drive and the blue light of the power supply were particularly creepy in the quiet night when everyone was not asleep. At first, the roommate said that the voltage in the dormitory was unstable and the computer circuit was activated. In addition, Zihong and his roommates were all liberal arts majors, and they didn't know much about electronic components. They just relied on their imagination and reluctantly accepted this statement. However, gradually, this kind of thing happened more and more frequently, regardless of whether the laptop computer was connected to the power supply or not. It would automatically turn on. And it happened after the lights were turned off and the power was turned off. Although everyone didn't say anything, they must have been scared in their hearts. After all, they were a group of men, and they had to be dignified no matter how scared they were. This continued until the second half of the freshman year, and even more weird things happened. It was one afternoon, after the roll call in the physical education class, Zihong and a roommate ran back to the dormitory and played games in a double row. Zihong was playing very enthusiastically when he heard his roommate playing music. Zihong was wondering why this guy played games without headphones and there was no game sound in the external speaker. Suddenly, the roommate who was playing games with him poked his head out and asked Zihong, "You don't wear headphones, why are you playing music? Don't you lose the game soon?" Zihong was stunned for a moment. This is to talk about the layout of Zihong's dormitory. The dormitory is all combined beds, with tables below and beds above. The roommate at that time was too lazy to use the long table below because he was playing games, so he ran to the upper bunk in the upper left corner and played with a small folding table behind the curtain. Zihong was playing games at the lower left corner near the door, using a long table. At that time, Zihong heard very clearly that the music came from the upper bunk on the window side of the dormitory. Seeing that Zihong didn't react, the roommate ran down quickly, and then the two of them started looking for the source of the sound in the dormitory. Finally, they found that the computer that was playing the music belonged to the guy who lived in the upper bunk in the upper right corner. But this guy had asked for leave to go home for several days because of the busy farming season. And before he left, he was afraid that the computer would be lost, so he turned it off and put it under the quilt. Finally, the two of them bravely turned off the guy's computer, and the sound stopped. School boys and girls swapping dorms. Because the incident happened in 2013, when Zihong had not yet enrolled, Zihong also knew about it through the mouth of the guidance student. And this senior sister was also one of the people who experienced the dormitory move. The incident was roughly like this. The school suddenly issued a notice asking all boys and girls in the school to swap dormitories, and the execution was very strong. The seniors who had experienced it at the time saw it all. At first, the students felt that the school's behavior was unreasonable, and they all refused. Some people even complained to the Education Commission, but all complaints were not responded to. Helplessly, everyone had to pin their hopes on the school to compromise on the dormitory exchange. But for some reason, all the teachers in the school were very active. There were even cases where some counselors broke into the student dormitories at any time of day and night and forcibly took the students away to exchange dormitories. Because it was summer, the seniors were wearing thin clothes in the dormitories. You can imagine how they felt when a group of male teachers broke into their dormitories. I don't know who started it, but they stood on the upper floor and threw kettles downstairs to protest. As a result, more and more people threw water, and the sound was like the firecrackers set off during the New Year, but none of these worked. The next morning, the downstairs was cleaned up again. Until the end, the school threatened to withhold the degree certificates, which allowed all the boys' and girls' dormitories to be completely exchanged. As for the school's behavior of carrying out large-scale dormitory exchanges despite public outrage, there are still many rumors circulating on campus. Among them, the most widely circulated version is that the school changed dormitories to suppress something with young energy. I heard from seniors that the area where Xiaohong and his classmates live now belongs to the school's 3rd district, and before that, all the people living there were girls. Legend has it that a senior once jumped off the building here. Because there are many foreign students in this school, it is inevitable that there will be some friction over time. It is said that this senior was bullied by a foreign student at that time. She also sought help from the school, but the school was afraid of affecting enrollment, so they found the senior privately and offered the condition of free guaranteed postgraduate study, hoping that the senior would stop promoting this matter. The senior could not accept it, and complained to other places but got no results, so she jumped off the building without thinking about it. After the senior's parents knew about it, they came to the school and made a fuss for a long time, so that the seniors who were studying at that time basically knew about it. Later, I don't know how the school solved it. But then, the school notified the boys and girls to exchange dormitories. At that time, most students guessed that it was because the senior left unjustly. The school exchanged dormitories so suddenly, it must be to use the boys' young energy to suppress the place where the accident happened. At this time, a netizen who knows a little bit of skills replied that the layout of the 3rd district of Xiaohong's school is very special. The hole is in the shape of a mouth and the only gap is building No. 10 on the east side. This netizen speculated that the school should have concentrated the young energy to scare away the thing by letting all the boys in the school live in the 3rd district. Then the thing can only go to building No. 10 through the only exit, and it just happens that the yin energy is heavy near the lake, so it will not run around after entering. Xiaohong replied that building No. 10 has a good scenery because it is next to an artificial lake. It should be very popular, but this building has never been occupied from the time he entered school to graduation in 2018. He also said that a senior sister asked before, the school dormitory is so tight that students are arranged to live off campus. Why not release building No. 10? Xiaohong said that there might be something in it, which led to strange things happening in his dormitory during his 4 years of college. Xiaohong's post ends here. After reading this story, I went to a certain authoritative website to search for related content. It was found that on June 30, 2014, there was indeed a related report on the official website of a certain Chinese broadcaster, but the general content only said that the school notified late. The exchanged dormitories had poor conditions, were unsafe, and were far away, which caused dissatisfaction among students, etc. But it is certain that this university did exchange dormitories for tens of thousands of people in a short period of time. And it even made the headlines because of this, but the specific reasons were not explained in detail. What do you think about this matter? Welcome to the comment area to exchange.